The Flash from My Hero Academia. Chapter 81. In the box of a restaurant in Osaka City. That is to say, you were rescued by a villains. Mandalay Cat was stunned. Professional Heroes was rescued by a villains, which is really rare. Almost. The North American short-hair cat nodded, with a complex look on his face. Before last night, the person who saved us was not a villains. He was active in Kyoto City for about a week, one of the underground heroes, but what happened last night, it is a matter of course to be defined as a villains. Underground heroes means dark heroes, villains side and professional heroes side have different names, but they all mean dark heroes. In fact, the behavior of the other party is not villains. Last night's action can be said to be that the other party wiped out the entire villains gang by himself, and saved thousands of kidnapped women. Moreover, she also learned that the rapid arrival of the Osaka City Police and the professional heroes seems to be the police reported by the other party. Thinking of the scene last night, her heart still felt a little chilled. According to the news from the hospital, the villains gang has a total of 127 people, of which 39 died on the spot, 42 died after rescue failed, 22 of the remaining 46 people are still in danger, and 8 cannot wake up. Of the vegetative people who came, only 16 survived in the end, but without exception, all of them were severely disabled for life. The kind that can't be cured. Laugh.jpg. Last night, the only villains who survived intact were the few submersibles caught by the post-professional heroes from Osaka Bay. Even if this ruthless method is used on villains, it is not surprising to define it as villains. Listening to the retelling of the North American Shorthair and Ragdoll, Mandalay and Tiger couldn't help but feel chills. A total of 81 lives, and so many wounded, this kind of person should be defined as a villains. The Mandalay Cat frowned and said in a deep voice. However, he saved more people. On the side, who suddenly said with emotion, thousands of girls who were almost sold abroad. And the other party is an underground heroes active from Kyoto. Unless it is a coincidence, otherwise, it is impossible to appear in Osaka out of thin air. That is to say, the other party found clues from Kyoto and tracked them all the way to Osaka, so it can be said that he saved them all by himself. Besides, whose voice paused, and he looked at the North American Shorthair and Ragdoll. Lucy and Zizi were also rescued by the other party. That's true. The Mandalay Cat nodded approvingly. Last night's situation was too thrilling. Without the intervention of the Devil Armor Man, Lucy, Zizi, and thousands of girls, but they will be bought by the other party and sent abroad. At that time, the outside world will be so big, it will not be easy to find their two companions back. Li Tian P. Backquote. Oh, you are the devil, you are the armor, you are the man. Hearing the words of the Tiger and the Mandalay Cat, the faces of the North American Shorthair Cat and the Ragdoll Cat also showed complicated expressions. This is also their entanglement. The savior and the brutal villains, these two seeming inconsistencies have merged into one in their lives. Let them not know what to do. Repaying kindness with revenge, they can't do that kind of thing. But the responsibility of professional heroes prevents them from helping villains. Decided. W. Mandalay Cat slapped the table, and said seriously, he saved Ryoko and Tomoko from this opponent, who is the benefactor of our heroes group Cat. The Mandalay Cat. The North American Shorthair, Ragdoll, and Tiger stared at the Mandalay Cat slapping the table and were stunned at the same time. HMPH, our cat is not the kind of guy who doesn't reciprocate his gratitude. Although that guy may not need it at all, but from today onwards, our cat will definitely not take any action against that guy. Mandalay Cat said directly. Forehead. Although Mandalay Cat's words are a bit carefree. But it reminds the North American Shorthair Cats and Ragdolls that their benefactors and the brutal villains who startled them are not ordinary little characters. The opponent is a ruthless person who single-handedly beat up a huge villains organization with more than 100 people. Repay the favor. How they repay their favor? The other party probably doesn't even know who they saved, and they don't even know about that guy's enemy attack, and they can't find a place to repay their favor. As for revenge, not to mention that it is impossible for them to repay their kindness, even if they are, as far as their strength is concerned, the four of them combined may not be enough to fight against each other. How can they repay their kindness? All they can do now is probably to ignore, and that's all they can do. The villains don't necessarily need to be punished, but the kindness, they must repay. As for how to report, it depends. The North American Shorthair cat and the Ragdoll cat looked at each other, and at the same time saw what was in each other's mind, and then showed a smile at the same time. What the two of them didn't know was that in another place, there was also a group of bigwigs worrying about how to deal with this matter. First of all, it is impossible not to report. There are thousands of girls who have been tied up, and it is impossible for them to stop Yo-Yo's mouth. If it is said that this action was carried out by the police and the professional heroes, then they will definitely make a big statement, injecting a boost to the somewhat shaken heroes society, but this incident turned out to be the handwriting of the famous underground heroes. And the methods are so cruel that they have 100% agreed to the request of the underground heroes to transfer to a villains. It is a trivial matter for an underground heroes to change jobs. The key is that the reason for this person's job change is to save thousands of abducted girls from the murdered villains. He saved everyone perfectly, not even a kidnapped woman was injured. Moreover, this incident also allowed them to successfully cut off the claws of the international temptation. For this alone, if it was done by a professional heroes, they might be able to get soft hands just for the bonus, but this series of premise complicates a simple matter to the extreme. Time flies, it is the last week of June, and there is less than a week left for the final exam of the heroes subject of Xiangying High School. It's over, I didn't study at all. Kaminari looked at the posted countdown, with a look of panic on his face. This semester is a sports meeting, a workplace experience, and big events like Kano and some time ago. That big news, there is no time to study at all. Kaminari equals 20th place in the middle of the class equals tail of the crane. Haha, Ashido smiled heartily. With a cold sweat all over his head, he smiled heartily. As the 19th place in her class, she also panicked. Indeed, there is no time to study for the various activities of this semester. Tokiyami, who was ranked 14th in the midterm class, also became nervous. His strength and the exam are very uncertain. That's right, the actual combat assessment is really a headache, Kutao said with a sad face, crossing Rulang's legs. Forehead. The burning eyes of Kaminari, Ashido and Tokiyami fixed on Grape at the same time. As the 9th place in the midterm exam in the class, the literary exam in the final exam can be said to be completely stress-free. Everyone, it's rare to have this kind of event, and you still have to go together to be happy. Right, on the side, Green Valley cheered on Kaminari and the others. That's right, as the vice monitor, I'm looking forward to making progress together with everyone. Iida cheered with a serious face. As long as you attend class and listen to lectures, there shouldn't be any problems with the written test. Hong said with a puzzled look on his face. Kaminari Ashido couldn't help but feel the viciousness of the top student from the cheering sounds from the 5th, 3rd and 6th place. On the seat beside him, Li Tian couldn't help but feel amused looking at the scene in front of him. As another god of learning pseudo person who tied for the first place in the midterm exam with Yayorozu Momo of the god of learning, Li Tian has no worries about the final exam, whether it is a written exam or a practical exam. The speed A force ability is simply too convenient to learn. If Li Tian hadn't understood that the speed A force was only to help him memorize things faster and improve his memory, rather than to really make him smart and become a master by reading books, maybe he would have rushed to the city library a long time ago. It's time for a big sweep, and the saying that knowledge is power is no joke. 2 weeks have passed since the last incident in Osaka, and for the Osaka incident, the police had released the news as early as a week ago. A villains organization that spanned almost half of Neon was uprooted. This matter has aroused considerable attention in the society, and discussions, especially in the report on the incident in Osaka. Thousands of abducted women were almost sold abroad, which caused an uproar. However, the fishing boats in the society are generally biased towards the police and professional heroes. As for the presence of Li Tian's disguised identity, Savita, in this incident, the sense of existence was compressed to the extreme, and the few insiders and professional heroes were even issued a gag order. Relevant information is also encrypted and hidden. Certainly, all of this was approved by Li Tian. At that time, Li Tian, who had been quiet for a week to avoid the limelight, couldn't help but went to Kyoto again after seeing that the officials hadn't moved, and then he was discovered. Of course, not his real identity was discovered. Instead, the authorities approached him. Discuss with him about the handling of the Osaka matter. The specific negotiation process does not need to be mentioned, but this matter eventually became what was reported. As for the benefits of Li Tian, does it make Savitar a low-key, luxurious and charming villains who will not be hunted down by professional heroes, arrested by the police, or targeted by the government? Thinking of this, Li Tian couldn't help shaking his head with a wry smile on his face. Here he has not become the hero's Flash, but the vest has turned into a cute and charming villain. What is this called? At noon, Xiangying Cafeteria. After all, the test scope of general subjects is what you have learned in class, and the difficulty will not be too great, but the content of the practical test is uncertain, which makes people feel very uncertain. At the long dining table, Lu Jiyu was thinking, a little helpless opened the mouth. What you learned in class? It won't be too difficult. Uraraka and Yi Yin looked embarrassed. They were the 13th and the 16th, they are not qualified to match this kind of words. The eyes of the two swept over the surrounding people. Li Tian, a euro who was tied for the first place with Yaoyorozu Wan. Needless to say, Iida was only ranked 3rd under Li Tian and Yaoyorozu Wan, and Green Valley was ranked 5th, and Asui 7th. Among the top 10, there are 5 of them beside the 2 of them, and they are all the top ones. It is true that the written test is not a problem, but the content of the practical test should not be too simple. This is Xiangying, the top school in the country. Iida didn't notice the expressions of Uraraka and Yi Yin at all, and his face was serious. The ground made up the knife and said, "It's not impossible, the content of the written test should not exceed the content of the textbook, but the actual test, even if Mr. Aizawa said that it will only test what we have learned. But there are also combat training, rescue training, evacuation training, heroes basics, etc., coupled with the recent form. If the difficulty of the exam increases several times, it will not be so simple." Li Tian reminded. He himself is very relaxed. No matter it is the written test or the actual combat, it will not be a big problem for him, not to mention passing the test easily, but it is not difficult. Oh, indeed. I almost forgot that before the workplace experience, the teacher said that our campus life will be 10 times or 8 times more difficult than before. Although the daily training is indeed much more difficult than before, it has not reached 10 times. Doubling the level of Yaoyorozu is the difficulty reflected in the final exam. I am so careless, I completely forgot about this kind of thing. If the final difficulty of the final exam is really increased by 10 or 8 times, then Xiangying. Lu Gu's broken thoughts came out continuously. Then what? Did I say something wrong? Li Tian looked at Lu Gu, and said with a twitch of his mouth. Probably. Everyone also looked helpless. Boom. Li Tian casually raised his hand to block the elbow strike on the back of his head. His face turned cold instantly. He lifted the hand and immediately flew the person behind him, sat on the ground with his buttocks and the dinner plate in his hand spilled all over his body. What happened? Hearing the movement, Lu Gu and the others raised their heads and turned around, looking behind them. I remember you are Wujian Ningren from Class B. Li Tian turned his head and looked at Wujian Ningren, who was lying on the ground behind him in a mess, and frowned. Next time, don't stand beside others casually. Sneak attack from behind. I can't control my instinctive reaction. Pain, pain, pain. Wujian Ningren hugged his shoulder with a livid face and cold sweat. The feeling of being directly lifted by his elbow was not very pleasant, and he even felt that his left shoulder had been dislocated. As expected of Class A, it's a deadly move every time you make a move. At least it's much better than your boring little moves, Li Tian said calmly. Really? Wujian Ningren hugged his shoulders and endured the pain with a pale face, but still with a sarcasm on his face. It's a terrible instinct to break a person's arm casually. If people know that Xiangying the students are so terrified, they will definitely feel terrified. Boom. A hand knife skillfully appeared directly on the head of Ningren Monahan, and Kazuka Kento stood beside Ningren Monahan in annoyance. Hurry up and go to the infirmary if you are injured, and you are still here. Provoking what? I'm sorry for Class A, this guy is a bit of a mental disorder, don't take what he said to heart, I have to send this guy to the infirmary, bye. This is the wounded, and it hurts badly. The corners of Kento Kazuka's mouth twitched as they watched the sullen face dragging the unconscious Wujian Ningren away. Very good. Li Tian scratched his chin and looked at Kento Kazuka's back and suddenly commented, the hand knife is neat and sharp, but Rikito is not too big or too small, just enough to knock him out without hurting that kid. Drag Zing's actions seemed rough, but they completely avoided the opponent's shoulder injury so that he would not aggravate it. Regardless of the strength, the knowledge and ability of rescue, almost no one in our class can match except Yaoyorozu Wan. Quote. Hearing Li Tian's comment, everyone was stunned for a moment, and turned their heads to look at Kazuka Kenta, who left in the distance in disbelief. There was such an explanation for the rough action just now. Everyone, it looks like we have to work harder. Class B is silent, but it has already caught up and even surpassed us. The situation during the sports festival may not happen now, Li Tian lightly said with a smile. Has Class B caught up? Everyone present counted as one, and after proving their resistance, they all ignited a flame called fighting spirit. Iida-kun still has some time for lunch break, let's go to combat training together. Green Valley sent an invitation to Iida with a serious face. And, without the slightest hesitation, Iida directly agreed. Li Tian, can you help us with our homework? Yi Yin asked Uraraka eagerly. Of course, no problem. Li Tian nodded in response. Asui-chan, come along too. I can be your sparring partner to exercise your actual combat ability. Yeah, Asui didn't hesitate, and agreed directly. After the decision was made, the few people did not hesitate, and after quickly finishing their lunch, they quickly acted. At the same time, in the meeting room of Shangying campus. Reform. A group of professional heroes teachers looked at Mr. Principal sitting at the top with a look of surprise. That's right, with the recent social fluctuations, villains' actions have become more and more frequent. As a school, we must do our best to prevent problems before they happen. Considering that the current society may gradually become intensified, we will continue to in the next teaching, we must pay more attention to actual combat. Mr. Principal said with a serious face. Put more emphasis on actual combat. Does it mean to teach students how to fight in advance? Midnight frowned and said in a deep voice. That's right, that's what it means. Mr. Principal nodded. Pay attention to actual combat. The third-year students of Shangying High School don't need to say much. In the past 3 years, whether it is practical experience or skills, they have already gone through a lot of tempering. Naturally, they don't need to worry about it. Therefore, their main consideration next is the first-year problems with second graders, especially first graders. The second grade is okay. After all, it has been a year of training, and education has already been on the right track. The next step is to continue to accumulate experience and exercise quirks. As for the freshmen who have just entered for 1 semester, they are still immature in terms of the use of quirks and combat experience, so Midnight will teach students how to fight in advance. Principal, can you tell me how your specific plan is arranged? All Might raised his hand and asked. Of course, Mr. Principal nodded and said, focus on practical teaching. The most important thing is the first-year students of the Heroes Department who have just entered the school, the beginning of the reform. We will also start with them. The first item is this year's final exam. We will no longer use robots that lack practical combat capabilities as opponents in previous years, but choose students from the main grade or our teachers to exercise practical combat ability. Third graders and teachers, this is too much. Someone said immediately, and the loud voice of Present Mike rang out. The third graders are fine, but let our teacher play and win easily. Is there any point in exercising? That's what makes sense, Mr. Principal said with a smile. What does this mean? Presenta Mike asked in confusion. Practice combat ability cannot be completed overnight. First of all, we need to let students understand their own weaknesses and weaknesses. Mr. Principal said with a smile. 0.0. Know your weakness and your weaknesses. Those present are all professional heroes. Mr. Principal just said a little bit, and it is easy to understand what Mr. Principal means. Only when you know your weakness can you work hard to become stronger, and only when you know your own weaknesses can you find the right goal and find the direction you can work hard. So that's how it is. I remember that Shangying's first-year students had a habit of exercising quirks in the woods during the summer vacation. During the final exam, they understood their own weaknesses and weaknesses. They can work harder in the woods. Go and become stronger. Cement nodded clearly. That's right, that's what it means. Mr. Principal nodded, and regarding this year's camp in the woods, I plan to increase the intensity a little bit, and let the students start designing their own nirvana while exercising quirks. Nirvana. Is it too early? Those students haven't mastered quirks to the point where they can start developing nirvana. As soon as Mr. Principal said this, everyone frowned and said, according to the practice of previous years, things like developing nirvana will only start when the temporary practice exam is approaching. At that time, after training in quirks, and also accumulated good experience to understand what kind of nirvana you need, killing skills will only begin. You underestimate the students, Mr. Principal said with a chuckle, interrupting everyone's discussion. The students this year are different from the previous ones. Among them, a group of professional heroes. Let them experience the real heroes' activities. As far as experience is concerned, they have enough nirvana. What is lacking is the exercise of quirks, and the desire for what kind of nirvana you specifically need. Hearing Mr. Principal's words, the professional heroes' teachers present frowned and began to think carefully. Seeing the hard thinking of all the teachers, Mr. Principal couldn't help but shook his head, and said again, I think everyone should agree on the reform. As for the ultimate skill, it's better to put it in the final exam. You have seen how the students' grades are deciding. Agree. I agree. Can. Hearing Mr. Principal's words, all the teachers looked at each other and nodded in agreement. Time flies, and in a blink of an eye, a week has passed between our fingers. Xiangying High School also ushered in the final exam. For 3 days in a row, all the content of the written test was over. The students in Class A who had good grades naturally need not say much. Department and the like. But yes, the admission deviation value of Xiangying High School is as high as 79, and how many of those admitted to Xiangmei are idiots? After the written test, the next thing to start is naturally the most stressful practical test. The central plaza of the actual test venue. Here is the actual combat test site of Xiangying High School. It has more than a dozen different battle venues, covering an area of a more than 300,000 mu. In Neon, which can be called every inch of land, it is definitely only available to top schools like Xiangying. Super large battle arena. All the students of Class A have gathered here, facing a group of professional heroes teachers, and 3 students in school uniforms, that is, the Big 3 of Heroes Senior 3. Big 3. Li Tian looked at the 3 standing with the teachers in surprise. Could it be that 090 invited them to the final exam this time? Content changes. A group of students looked at the teachers in bewilderment. That's right, I told you that I should have collected information beforehand, and I should have understood some of the exam content. Aizawa Shota said in a deep voice. Everyone. Unfortunately, this year's exam is no longer the robot battle of previous years, but a brand new reform. Mr. Principal suddenly got out of Aizawa Shota's scarf, and said with a smile on his face. Looking at the scene in front of him, Li Tian really admired Mr. Principal, even though he was originally a mouse, but he could endure Aizawa Shota's sloppiness and committed himself to this, just to surprise the students. This is really a good, dedicated teacher, good principal. In previous years, the exam was to fight robots. Isn't that the same as the entrance exam? It's going to change this year. Why? Listen to the discussion of the students. Mr. Principal, who had been smiling just now, suddenly lost his smile and looked at the students in front of him with a blank expression. Even Aizawa Shota looked at his students with the corners of his eyes twitching. This is definitely the worst class of students he has ever brought up. It's so cute. Millions, did you hear that they didn't investigate the content of the final exam? Undulating Convoluted excitedly looked at Zhongwei from Class A with big eyes full of smiles. Indeed, I remember that during the first final exam that year, many students asked the seniors about the content of the exam and discussed it wildly. Million, who looked very similar to Tintin, said with a hearty smile. Teacher, who are they? Iida-san raised his hand decisively and asked. The gazes of the others also looked over curiously, and they had already noticed that the 3 people here were different from the teachers of the professional heroes, especially Putao, whose eyes had not changed since the beginning, and had been staring at Wave Spiral. They are your seniors in the 3rd grade, the top elite among the heroic students, Big 3. They are here to assist you in the final exam, and there will be 3 groups of you against them. Aizawa Shota introduced. Hello everyone, please take care of me. Except for the heavenly ghoul ring who didn't speak, Million and Undulating Spiral greeted everyone in Class A generously. Big Three. I think I've heard people say about them. They really exist. That's a Wesame a Euro. Okay, you can discuss things like self-introduction later, and now, announce the content and rules of the final exam. Aizawa Shota interrupted everyone and said directly. Next, you will form a team of 2 to face our teacher and their Big Three. In addition, the grouping of the students and the teacher who will be playing against each other have been decided in advance. Aizawa Shota said lightly. At the same time, his warning eyes were fixed on everyone. As the person who knew his students best, he knew that if he didn't do this, he would face a series of problems. It is determined by the school based on various factors such as everyone's behavior habits, grades, quirks application, and intimacy. Now, all students follow the teacher who is about to fight to their respective examination rooms and start preparing. Aizawa Shota's warning gaze was still quite useful, but none of the people in Class A came forward with their faces full of questions, but walked obediently to their respective buses to go to the examination room. This is our examination room. It really is Xiangying's usual style, it's big and bold enough. Li Tian looked at the surrounding forest and couldn't help but click his tongue. Every time he feels the arrogance of Xiangying, Li Tian can't help but have an urge to rob. Of course, compared to robbing, Li Tian is more curious about where Xiangying's money comes from. Get financed. Even the top universities in the country would not be able to obtain such an astonishingly large amount of money. Principal's office on the top floor of Heroic Academy. Mr. Principal sat in the principal's office calmly drinking his favorite black tea, looked at the red and green lines on the computer, and moved his fingers regretfully. Sure enough, the impact is huge, and this year's income is a bit low. It barely offsets the school expenses. What luck. Jiro Kyoka looked at Li Tian who was on the side, and his heart had already blossomed secretly. As a team with the recognized bigwigs in the class, Jiro feels that he has done well in this game. Just take a teacher who doesn't seem very strong, how could he be their opponent? Present Mike sneezed directly at the entrance of the jungle examination room, rubbed his nose and looked puzzled. They said they were grouped according to intimacy, but they didn't get into a group with Li Tian. The school lied. Yi Yin was angry. When she heard that they were grouped according to intimacy, she thought she would definitely be in the same group as Li Tian. What about the group? The degree of intimacy does not necessarily mean that if you have a close relationship, you will be grouped together. Don't you see that Green Valley and Bakugo are also grouped together? The tentacles behind Shoji opened their mouths and said, "What do you mean? Aren't Green Valley and Bakugo close childhood sweethearts?" Yi Yin was taken aback, looking at Shoji strangely. The corner of Shoji Aeuro's mouth twitched under the mask. That Aeuro's how you could tell they were close childhood sweethearts. The relationship between Green Valley and Bakugo is very bad, Shoji said helplessly. But Li Tian clearly told me that LVGU and Bakugo have been friends since they were young, so for them, fighting is a sign of their affection. Yi Yin opened his eyes wide. Shoji suddenly felt so flustered that he was speechless. This is because the school considers the close relationship between you two. If you were to be grouped together, Li Tian would not let you participate in the battle, so he couldn't see your strength. The sharpshooter teacher explained. That's it. Yi Yin nodded, suddenly expressing his understanding. Achoo. Achoo. Both Bakugo and Green Valley sneezed at the same time. Haha, you really have a tacit understanding. You even sneezed together. Million laughed and said in front of the two. Who would have a tacit understanding with him? Bakugo was instantly annoyed, pointing at Green Valley and angrily said. That. Lu Jiyu also looked helpless. This senior directly ordered Bakugo to explode. The exam that is waiting for it seems to be troublesome. Hey, Ashido-san, if your horn is accidentally broken, can it grow back? Also, can you make it move? Undulating Spiral asked excitedly with curiosity. Ashido was about to speak. By the way, Kaminari-san, is it true that you will temporarily lose your IQ when you run out of batteries? What does it feel like to lose your IQ? Wouldn't it be interesting? The Undulating Spiral moved to Kaminari's side again and asked curiously. Kaminari's mouth twitched slightly, just about to refute the rumor. Curious baby Undulating Helix once again came to Ashido's side. Student Ashido, what skincare products do you usually use for your pink skin? It's so smooth and tender. Naruto, Ashido, Superior, Senior, I'll leave it to you for the exams to come, please be merciful. Uraraka clasped his hands together and said to Tianggui Huan with a smile. Tian Guhuan was about to speak with a nervous expression on his face. Just for the sake of my refreshing face, answer the girl's prayer. Aoyama Yuga showed a bright and glowing smile to the sky ring. Tian Guhuan was sweating profusely. Tian Guhuan was at a loss. Tian Guhuan wanted to leave. Yaoyorozu Momo and Hiroshi faced Aizawa Shota. Asui A Tokiyami the two faced the ethereal ghost. Shiro A Mineta, facing Midnight. Sato Kirishima the two faced the cement division. Iida Ojiro and the two faced Mr. Principal. Students have already arrived at the appointed place, so the final exam of the first grade of Heroic Academy, ready a euro, go. Originally, it was supposed to be a quiet forest full of birdsong and flowers, filled with the strange calls of Presenta Mike and Jiro's hesitant cries. What the hell is this? Jiro, who originally thought that this level would be passed easily, covered his ears in despair and yelled frantically. Teachers' quirks are super noisy. They used to attack with a loud voice. Li Tian also covered his ears, with a distressed expression on his face, and replied loudly. In this environment, if you don't roar, you can't hear it at all. Is this exactly my superior quirks? Li Tian, a euro, can't you run over and handcuff the teacher? Your ears can't take it anymore. Jiro covered his ears with pain on his face. No way. Li Tian was also speechless. Even if my speed is faster than the teacher's speed of sound, this is not a race. Running fast will allow me to avoid the waves and pass the doctor. He knows why the school chose Presenta Mike to be his opponent, and he also carries a weight equal to his own body weight as in the rules. Isn't this a large-scale indiscriminate attack tower that will never move? Defense building. There are two ways to pass the final exam. One is to rush out of the gate of the exam room within 30 minutes under the obstruction of the professional hero's teacher and end the exam. The other is to handcuff a pair of hands to the professional hero's on the hands of the teacher, complete the arrest and end the exam. Of course, there is still a big gap between students and professional heroes' teachers, so professional teachers also have a limit, and they carry weights equivalent to their own weight to fight with students. But now, even if Li Tian's speed beats the speed of sound by a few blocks, and Present Mike's teacher by a few hundred blocks, but Present Mike keeps shouting at the entrance of the examination room, Li Tian can't throw his arms away from him. Yinlang left the examination room directly. As for being close to the Present Mike to complete the capture, Li Tian feels that his eardrums should not be strong enough to withstand the sound waves of howling ghosts and wolves from hell. No breathing at all. Is this teacher a monster? Li Tian listened to the continuous voices coming from his ears with a speechless face. Originally, he wanted to wait for the teacher at the door to stop to take a breath and run over. The person who arrested the other party ended up with 3 minutes passing. If it wasn't for that move that hasn't been completed yet, don't say you are a sound wave wall, even if it is a solid wall, I will show you. Li Tian, not A. As long as Presenta Mike stands in place and blocks the door, the entire examination room will be covered by the other party's voice, and the closer to the entrance of the examination room, or the closer to Presenta Mike, the stronger the sound wave will naturally be. All kinds of winning conditions that are beneficial to other students are completely reversed here. Li Tian pulled Jiro helplessly to the edge of the examination room, which is the farthest place from the Present Mike teacher. With the forest as a natural barrier, the sound intensity is naturally much lower than before. What's the matter? Our first grade boss, Xiangyang, will only hide like a little mouse. Aren't you out yet? It's useless to hide and delay time. Teacher, my lungs have undergone special training. With the aid of equipment, even if I talk like this, I can breathe, so there will never be any gaps. Even no matter how fast Li Tian is, he will definitely not find a gap to come over. Presenta Mike's howling ghosts and howling wolves kept echoing in the forest. Hearing the voice of Presenta Mike next to his ear, Jiro panicked, talking while breathing. What kind of monster is this teacher? Is there really no way Li Tian can solve the teacher? Jiro asked anxiously, looking at Li Tian who was at the side. This is not impossible. Li Tian thought for a while and said. Here, the straight line distance from Mr. Presenta Mike is only about 3,000 meters. He can run there in less than 2 seconds at full speed. With the noise intensity of Pracentum mic and the forest's natural destructive power to noise reduction, the noise that can cause harm to Li Tian is about 1,500 meters around the Pracentum mic, and Li Tian can run at the speed of Li Tian in less than a second. And for 1 second, Li Tian can still bear this level of noise, and his ears won't be injured, but it will be very uncomfortable. Besides, even if Mr. Pracentum mic can breathe without leaving any gaps while speaking, the exam time is 30 minutes. This kind of thing, which is almost impossible for humans, even if it is completed, it is impossible to think it will last too long. But, Jiro, this exam is up to you, Li Tian said solemnly, looking at Jiro Kyoka in front of him. Jiro Kyoka. Ah, rely on her. What the hell? What a tolerable brat. At the exit of the examination room, Pracentum mic kept yelling strangely, with a helpless expression on his face. 10 minutes. He can shout for 10 minutes at most while exhaling, and after 10 minutes, he will have to rest for at least 10 seconds before he can start again, but if the limit is not reached, the rest time should be shortened to the minimum as possible. In 1 second, he can maintain a 6-minute break. The former, resting for 10 minutes and 10 seconds, is absolutely impossible. Stopping for 10 seconds may not matter to other candidate groups, but for Li Tian in his group, 10 seconds is simply not too lenient. But the same is true for the latter, once every 6 minutes, too often. 30 minutes, he needs at least 4 breaths to survive. Even if he adjusts the rest time and maintenance time properly, he can survive 3 breaths. But as long as Li Tian is not an idiot, he should be able to detect the moment of breathing, the time for 3 breaths, even if the first time is ignored, but as long as he endures a little, 2 breaths are enough for Li Tian to catch him or calmly rushed out. Pracentum mic shouted and looked up at the sky helplessly. Leave the most difficult kid to me to deal with. What kind of bug can my quirks restrain him? That black-bellied guy from the principal is definitely because of what I said during the meeting so casually knocked down that the students took revenge. I can only create suspicions, and then find a chance to take a breath and rest as much as possible so that the other party will not notice it. Pracentum mic is thinking about countermeasures while arranging Mr. Principal. However, Pracentum mic looked up in confusion. Boom, boom, boom. The powerful heartbeat turned into sound waves frantically cancelling out his noise in the distance. How courageous. Present mic froze for a moment, then smiled, and shouted because of the smile. The opponent actually rushed out head-on, and chose the simplest and straightforward way of head-to-head. You didn't rush out alone, but relied on your companion quirks. I really underestimated you before, but this voice is too soft. Pracentum mic laughed loudly, and the already terrifying sound wave suddenly increased. If it was just a wave of sound before, then it was a tsunami of noise, sweeping towards that side. In the middle of the forest, about 1,500 meters away from Pracentum mic, Jiro covered her ears and walked forward. The loudspeaker on her foot was plugged into her earphones, and there was a loud noise. A wall of sound was cast in front of him to offset the already not too strong super noise. Her quirks, headphone plug, in addition to being able to hear a very subtle sound, once the plug is connected, it can also transmit the sound of her heartbeat into a loud noise, and it is precisely with the help of the same source noise like heartbeat sound, she can counteract the super noise of the Pracentum mic. But hey, is it really okay for Li Tian to do this? My voice is far worse than Mr. Mike's, and I can barely hold on now. If I get closer, then I won't be able to hold on. Jiro Kyoka hesitated, looking to the side. Li Tian said. Li Tian stood behind Jiro, although there are still some sounds here, but most of the noise coming directly has been cancelled by Jiro, so the noise is not very destructive. Of course, the rest is left to me, Euro. Before Li Tian could finish speaking, Pracentum mic's terrifying sound wave like a huge tsunami rushed over, directly smashing the wall of sound that Jiro had originally cast to counteract the sound wave. But it came so fast. Li Tian entered the speed force mode in an instant. Looking at the terrifying sound that broke through Jiro's sound wall, there was no sadness or joy on his face. If it is said that before entering school, facing the sound waves of Pracentum mic, Li Tian could only resist the past, but now with the addition of Jiro, he can turn everything upside down. Extreme speed power, increase. Li Tian pressed against Jiro's shoulder, the speed a euro force directly connected to Jiro, and then, running like crazy. Every step Li Tian took, a large amount of speed force was born, and then it was input into Jiro's body without reservation. This is... Jiro, who had been motionless in Li Tian's field of vision, suddenly asked with a puzzled look on his face. Welcome to my world. Li Tian looked at the moving Jiro with a smile on his face. HMPH, it's still too early to go head to head with the teacher. A euro. Presenta Mike looked at the terrifying sound impact visible to the naked eye, his face was full of complacency. However, Presenta Mike suddenly looked into the distance and widened his eyes, full of disbelief. The terrifying sound howl that made him so proud just now was defeated head-on, and the wall of sound waves that defeated his sound howl was still attacking him at a speed visible to the naked eye. Hey, this is too much. Presenta Mike panicked, and then he stopped holding his hand. No, he kept his voice, and the power of the noise was fully activated in an instant, and a wave of terrifying howls swept away crazily. The terrifying sound wall with the sound of the heartbeat almost piercing the city was like a real copper wall and iron wall, crushing the sonic howls without mercy. As we all know, the speed of sound is 340 meters per second, and the distance between him and Li Tianjiro is less than 1,500 meters, so after 2 seconds. This is too embarrassing to the teacher. Presenta Mike covered his ears and listened to the loud noise in pain, roaring crazily. However, crack, the capture is complete. Panting slightly, Li Tian stood next to Presenta Mike with a smile and said, Teacher Mike, we are the ones who won. Accompanied by Li Tian's voice, the noise of Presenta Mike and Jiro's heartbeat that accelerated 200 times dissipated at the same time, and the whole world was silent. Li Tian, A Euro Jiro team, the conditions have been met. A reminder sounded from the side immediately. The final exam practical test is over. Mr. Present Mike left when the exam was over. At the entrance of the examination room, Li Tian was sitting here idly fiddling with the grass in his hand. This kind of battle is really boring, it's like fighting that million or two other big threes. Li Tian sighed helplessly. For him, the battle of today's exam has no practical significance at all. It looks like it's time for Savitar to break out of the rivers and lakes. Li Tian's eyes flickered. After keeping a low profile for such a long time, and the official side has already done it, it seems that it is time for Savitar to come back out of the rivers and lakes. Li Tian was so lost in thought that he didn't even notice when Jiro came over. This guy, Jiro, who trotted more than 1,000 meters all the way, looked at Li Tian who was sitting at the entrance of the examination room doing nothing, and couldn't help being speechless. He was so idle with nothing to do, he didn't know to go to pick her up. Obviously at his speed, it would take less than 3 seconds to go back and forth, but he would rather sit here in a daze for 3 minutes than go to pick her up. Is this the comrade who just finished fighting side by side? It's finally here, let's go. Li Tian stood up and patted his butt. Now we will go to the central square, and we should be able to see the battles of other groups of students. Steel Straight Man. Looking at Li Tian's leaving figure, Jiro silently added a label to Li Tian in his heart. Li Tian, A Euro who was the first to go to the bus, didn't know that he had become a straight man of steel in Jiro's mind. How wronged he is. Boom classmate, I have a plan. Yaoyorozu Wan, who was squatting in the corner of the street in the simulated street examination room, said in a deep voice. Plan, he couldn't help being startled. That's right, Yaoyorozu Wan nodded, and with a thought, a tumbler popped out from his arm. The battle between us and Mr. Aizawa is about who goes first and the opponent. If you are matched, Teacher Z has found us, so we can only run for our lives and keep running away. But again, if we discover Aizawa-sensei first, we can set a trap in advance and occupy a favorable position. After all, Aizawa-sensei's elimination of quirks is not directly combative. As long as we don't appear in front of Aizawa-sensei, the operability is still great. Wait a minute, even if you say that, in comparison, the possibility of us finding Mr. Aizawa in advance is too small. Hong frowned and interrupted. Although he is very confident in his own strength, he is not without self-knowledge. The two students, whether they are hiding themselves or looking for villains, are inferior to the real professional heroes Aizawa Shota too far. That's right, I 3/4. Yaoyorozu Wan also nodded, of course she understood this. This is my plan. Yaoyorozu Wan stuffed the tumbler on his arm into the package behind him. Mr. Aizawa's experience in searching villains has left us very far. It can be said that it is no surprise that Aizawa-sensei must have found us first to launch a surprise attack, rather than us finding Aizawa-sensei first. Hong couldn't help being startled, and looked at Yaoyorozu Wan in puzzlement, since he knew, why did he plan like this? Now that we know that Aizawa-sensei will definitely find us first, then of course we can take advantage of this and turn around and plot against Aizawa-sensei. After all, the characteristics of Aizawa-sensei's quirks after activation are too obvious to us. The corner of Yaoyorozu Wan's mouth revealed a touch of confidence. Well, I found the target. On the top of the residential building, Aizawa Shota squatted on it and looked at the two people who were advancing cautiously on the street in the distance, with a smile in his eyes. Are you very cautious? You know how to activate quirks non-stop to prevent my appearance. It seems that they have realized the gap between themselves and professional heroes in terms of searching places, but they are still too young. Aizawa Shota grinned at the corner of his mouth, and with a smile, he jumped into the alley and galloped forward to go around. On the street, Hong and Yaoyorozu Wan clung to the wall of the street and walked forward carefully. Ms. Aizawa hasn't found us yet. A faint flame danced in Hong's left hand, as if a gust of wind could extinguish it, but under the action of Hong's quirks, the flame never meant to go out. It's best not to be discovered by the teacher. We just sneaked all the way to the exit, Yaoyorozu Wan whispered, and at the same time put the tumbler that emerged from his arm behind him. While walking, the two came to a corner, and after poking out his head cautiously to check, he said easily, "We didn't find Mr. Aizawa, we." Before the words can be uttered, there are more than a dozen cloth-like things suddenly appearing on the side of Hong, which directly wraps Hong tightly. It is Aizawa Shota's catch net, and, I don't know what at that time, the flame in Hong's left hand was completely extinguished. You guys are so naive. Aizawa Shota rushed out from the corner where Hong confirmed safety. No, to be precise, he rushed out from a family's house at the corner, wearing goggles and staring at Hong. Yaoyorozu Wan. Two people. Eliminate quirks already activated. Whether it is Hong or Yaoyorozu Wan, quirks has been completely lost at this time. The two 15-year-old boys and girls who lost quirks have to face heroes, a senior professional who is proficient in gymnastics. No matter how you look at this scene, the ending is already set. However, the right hand under Hong's body, which was tied up by Aizawa Shota's capture net, moved flexibly, and something fell out of the cuff. What? Aizawa Shota was obviously taken aback, watching the falling tumbler pop open in midair, and a grenade-like thing appeared in his sight. Not good. Aizawa Shota instantly realized what it was, and was about to close his eyes in an instant, but it was too late. The flash bomb was specially made by Yaoyorozu Wan, and it exploded immediately when it appeared from the tumbler. The dazzling light stabbed Aizawa Shota's eyes directly and fiercely. That is to say, relying on eyes to fight on weekdays, Aizawa Shota has long acquired the habit of not blinking casually in battle, but this time he was severely pitted by this habit. The dazzling flash bombs did not go out after a moment of eruption, but continued to release dazzling light for as long as 5 or 6 seconds. At the moment when he sensed something was wrong and was dazzled and lost his sight, Aizawa Shota wanted to jump back and prepare to leave for the time being. However, at some point, his feet were already wrapped in a layer of ice. On the side, Yaoyorozu Wan, who was wearing special sunglasses, hurried forward and put the handcuffs directly on Aizawa Shota's hands. Catch the teacher. Yaoyorozu Wangsun's voice reached Aizawa Shota and Hong's ears. Yi Song couldn't help being shocked. After all, he was facing a professional hero. He wasn't worried that his acting skills would be seen before. But Aizawa Shota couldn't help showing a big smile on his face. Although he seemed to be easily caught, he failed to achieve the main purpose of this actual combat test, making the students realize their own weakness. But he is really happy. Yaoyorozu Wan, Boom Team, fulfill the conditions. A reminder that the two of them passed suddenly came from the loudspeaker at the side. To take advantage of the momentary slack after I caught Tomo, Aizawa Shota also figured out Yaoyorozu Wan and Tomo's plan at this time. First of all, they knew from the very beginning that they would not be his opponent in terms of search, so they considered the result of being attacked by him at the beginning. And the result, very successful. Compared with Yaoyorozu Wan, Aizawa Shota's primary target is obviously the more powerful Hong. Therefore, the two of them simply took advantage of this. When Hong was captured by him, the plan had already started, such as the special captured posture. It is very convenient to throw out the flash bomb hidden in the cuff. And he took advantage of the slack in the moment when he banned Wang Nuo's bombarding quirks to release the flash bombs prepared in advance to limit his quirks, and then use the ice ability to imprison him mad. And Yaoyorozu Wan is responsible for capturing him who has lost his sight and mobility in the strong light. What a great plan. 4 or 5 seconds passed, the flash bomb stopped glowing, Hong also opened his eyes, and untied the capture net wrapped around himself. Without Aizawa Shota's interference, Hong easily broke free. As for Aizawa Shota, after being shaken, it may take several minutes to recover his eyesight. I didn't expect the plan to go so smoothly. Hong looked at the captured Aizawa Shota in disbelief. Do the math with your mind, but don't care about it. Yaoyorozu Wan shook his head slightly. This time we were able to plan successfully, because Aizawa-sensei didn't think that we were calculating him. No, there is no fluke or carelessness in fighting. Aizawa Shota directly interrupted Yaoyorozu Wan's self-effacing. Whatever the final result is, it is there. There is no doubt that this is your strength. Power beyond my imagination. Hearing Aizawa Shota's encouragement, Yaoyorozu suddenly showed a bright smile in case he was startled. Okay, the third examination room. Sora Oni, the battle with Asui Tokiyami is over, and unlike the original, this time, because of the severe form, Sora Oni, who got serious, didn't give the two of them the slightest chance at all. From the beginning to the end, the two have been fighting with the clone of the ghost teacher Kong Ling for a full 30 minutes. Until the last moment, neither of them could catch, no, neither could find the real body of Kong Ling's soul. On the contrary, I was very tired. The fourth examination room. Cement Division. The battle with Kurashima Sato is still the same. The two hot-blooded guys rushed towards the Cement Division sensei with brute force. In the end, after breaking through countless concrete walls one after another, they were covered by countless water mud surging in. Total defeat. The fifth examination room. Midnight. Shiro A. Mineta's battle, also not much difference. Shiro's carelessness, as well as Putao's ingenuity shown by his superb acting skills, successfully passed the actual combat test from Teacher Midnight, who didn't hold back at all. Of course, still clearing the level alone. The sixth examination room. Marksman, Yi Yin A. Half Shoji's battle. Although Yi Yin is already better than the original book, I don't know Euro Tino, but the quirk's automatic tracking of the sharpshooter teacher who is serious is almost completely defeating Yi Yin. Even with the joint efforts of Shoji and the two of them, it is still impossible the slightest carelessness marksman teacher to win. Seventh examination room. It is a battle between Mr. Principal and Ojiro Iida. Here, it is different from the grouping in the original book, but the scene is still a dense industrial area similar to the playground. This time, our opponent is Mr. Principal Ojiro-kun. Do you know what Mr. Principal's quirks are? Iida frowned and asked in a deep voice. Ojiro was startled, then thought about it, and said, Principal's quirks. I remember like. Before Ojiro could finish speaking, a violent explosion suddenly occurred in the dense industrial plant beside the two, and countless ruins rushed towards the two in the middle in an instant. No, run. Iida didn't have time to think. He hugged the tail on the side and ran out quickly with the engine fully on. What's going on here? After rushing out of the collapsed area, Ojiro looked at the unburied road behind him in panic. I'm afraid the principal has discovered us and launched an attack, Iida said solemnly. But, how did this happen? We didn't see the principal. Ojiro looked puzzled. Not only Ojiro, but also Iida at this time, the doubts in his heart are definitely not much less than Ojiro, but Mr. Principal didn't intend to make them think at all. The rocker in his hand kept shaking, and a huge pendulum under the control of Mr. Principal kept destroying the surrounding buildings. Then, a series of chain reactions happened quickly, which finally led to Iida and the field around the two of Ojiro kept collapsing. No time to think. Run. Iida and Ojiro fled desperately with terrified faces. There was no time to think about other things in their minds. The series of house collapses and explosions behind them did not seem like a joke, they were really fatal. What kind of chain reaction will be caused by destroying it? For me, the calculation of this level is as simple as making tea. In the huge tower crane, Mr. Principal shook the joystick while lifting the red car on the side drank. Mr. Principal, Quirk's super standard mind, is an animal that has awakened far beyond human IQ. The time passed by 1 minute and 1 second, and 1/3 of the 30-minute exam time passed in a blink of an eye, and Iida and Ojiro did not realize that they had completely moved away from the exit position unknowingly. I can't run away like this without thinking. If I go on like this, I can only be played by the principal until the end of the exam. While running wildly, Iida finally realized this. But, _W, Ojiro screamed, and Iida ground with his tail forcefully, brushing straight out of the rubble that nearly buried him alive. Almost he was buried in it. Picking up Ojiro, Iida's engine was fully turned on, and he quickly escaped from the two sides of the factory where Mr. Principal was the next target. When it's time to run for your life, don't you still have to run for your life? Ojiro-san, next I need to prepare to escape with all my strength, and it's up to you to think about our qualified tactics. Iida said to the tail on his shoulders. He is now exhausted just by dealing with the surrounding environment, and he really does not have the ability to think about those. Ojiro was stunned for a moment, and then he realized in an instant that he was not stupid. Just to deal with the blow from the principal who didn't know where it came from, Iida had already gone all out, and now he was carrying him. Then I really started to fight. How to do? Resisted by Iida on his shoulders, his tail quickly moved his brain, thinking of a solution to the rich situation in front of him. Although the surrounding clutter prevented him from knowing where they were, he could also imagine that they must be far away from the exit of the examination room and Mr. Principal who was hiding in the examination room. Yes, Ojiro looked at the constantly collapsing ruins behind him, and a glint of hope flashed in his eyes. Iida-san, I thought of a way to win. Ojiro said hastily, the ruins left behind after being used by the principal to attack. The ruins will not cause us any trouble, and it will be difficult for Mr. Principal's second use. Ruins. Iida was stunned, looking at the houses collapsing behind him, and a series of ruins left in the distance. The city, his face under the helmet was stunned. Yes. We can step on these. The ruins go to the entrance of the exit from the examination room. Finally found out. Mr. Principal was drinking tea with a smile on his face at the top of the tower crane. The road to ruins is exactly the way he left behind to clear the customs. Mr. Principal laughed with a sullen look on his face. Ha 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 ha, is it so easy to escape? Come, accept the baptism of your profession. 15 minutes later, exam exit. Iida, whose armor was broken in many parts, and Ojiro, who looked like a refugee, walked out of the examination room tremblingly. Iida, Ojiro team, fulfill the conditions. Phew. It's much more comfortable to vent out. In the examination room, Mr. Principal regained his calm face, and Yuga was enjoying the rat life on the top of the tower crane. The 8th examination room. Different from those professional heroes' teachers, the opponent in this exam is the undulating spiral in the top elite BIG3 of Harrowing High School, and different from the teachers, as students, they did not carry weights to limit their strength. In the 8th examination room, Ashido, Mina and Kaminari, who had already turned into a strong face, were circling in midair with both hands raised by the undulating spiral, listening to the undulating spiral. Various energetic questions that have been stopped. Now, they just want this to end quickly. 9th examination room. A euro ask for flowers. A euro. They are also members of BIG3. The day before yesterday, an Aoyama faced the battle of BIG3's Tiangu Ring. Although his personality is extremely introverted, he didn't hesitate at all when fighting, and he fought sharply and decisively. Almost from the very beginning, the battle situation was one-sided. Uraraka and Aoyama had no strength to fight back at all, and even fled because the other party had no intention of really catching them. But even so, 30 minutes passed. Two people did not meet the conditions. The 10th examination room is also the final examination room. The strongest among BIG3, also known as Million among all professional heroes, who was closest to All Might, played against Bakugo and Green Valley. The two obviously didn't know how powerful the senior in front of them was. Don't follow me. That guy, I can pass the exam by myself, I don't need you to follow me. Bakugo glared at Green Valley behind him, and warned. But Kacchan, neither the strength of that senior nor quirks is clear. Since the other party can be rated as a member of the strongest elite of heroes, it means that the other party's strength is definitely not weak. You can't just rush forward like this. You should first test. 0. Shut up. Bakugo looked annoyed. Looking at Lugu beside him, his eyes became inexplicably angry. Don't think that you just stomped your nose on your face after learning some new tricks. Now that I hear your voice, I feel uncomfortable and want to kill you. Kajiong. LVGU looked at Bakugo, who refused to listen, and also became annoyed. Different from when he was timid and afraid of getting into trouble, after meeting All Might and inheriting One for All, he has encountered too many things. He is no longer the one who was yelled at by Bakugo and just said yes to him. Are you going to fight? That's right, before fighting that guy, I'll kill you to pieces. Bakugo grinned ferociously, turned to face Green Valley, and assumed a fighting posture. Ka-jong. Lugu's expression changed involuntarily. Obviously he didn't expect that Bakugo would want to fight him at this time. Boom, boom. The explosion sounded directly, and following the impact of the explosion, Bakugo flew towards Green Valley in an instant. You fool, this explosion will definitely expose us and attract the attention of the seniors. Green Valley completed the full coverage of One for All in an instant, and at the moment when he leapt out to avoid it, his face still had disbelief. Bakugo actually really say it and shoot it. Bakugo looked at the dodging Green Valley, with an angry killing intent on his face, and shouted indifferently, it's just right to attract attention, let him come to find him. Before Bakugo finished speaking, Million's figure popped out of the ground very abruptly, and at the same time a fist was imprinted heavily on Bakugo's abdomen. The sudden appearance of Million and the location where he appeared were completely unexpected to Bakugo, and the speed of the punch made him have no time to react at all. Rikido was equally astonishing, and Bakugo only felt like his stomach was overwhelmed. How could it be? How could it be possible? Holding his belly, Bakugo opened his mouth wide, staggered back, his mind was blank. One blow. One blow made Bakugo incapable of fighting. From a distance, Green Valley also looked shocked, looking at Million, who popped up from the ground in disbelief. Million yelled, then turned his head to look at the position of Green Valley. With a serious face, the team is not in harmony, and there is internal strife before the battle. This is a taboo for professional heroes on the battlefield, but yes, no, you guys like this can't even become professional heroes' corpses. Team disharmony, internal strife before a battle. This is a taboo for professional heroes on the battlefield, but yes, no, you like this, it is even impossible to become a professional heroes. Looking at Green Valley and Bakugo with a serious face. Impossible to be a professional heroes. Holding his belly, Bakugo staggered back, and was stunned. He is the best one around. Almost everyone whispers in his ears, you will definitely become an excellent heroes in the future. Bakugo is really excellent. You will definitely become a great heroes in the future. Such a powerful quirks. Bakugo will definitely be a powerful heroes in the future. But, someone said that he can't become a professional heroes. Impossible to be a pro heroes. Impossible. Bakugo roared with a ferocious face, and the violent explosion roared in the palms of his hands, and he rushed towards Million directly. Can you still move? Million glanced at Bakugo, and couldn't help showing a hint of surprise in his eyes. The punch just now should be enough to make Bakugo unable to stand up for a short time. Go to hell. In an instant, with the roar of 260. Bakugo, his figure appeared directly in front of Million. He turned his right hand with the palm facing outwards, and the intense explosion roared, and the huge impact made him rush in midair. Spinning, the right hand with the huge grenade armor smashed out without mercy. However, Million just stood there, not looking at Bakugo at all, but staring at Green Valley with burning eyes. Bakugo's face became more ferocious in an instant, and the explosion in the palm of his hand also quietly strengthened a little, and he no longer kept his hand. However, go through. Bakugo's attack went through Million's body without any effect. What happened? The powerful punch fell out of thin air, and Bakugo lost his balance in midair. For Bakugo, this is not a serious problem. His explosion can easily restore him to this balance, but... Boom! Million hit Bakugo in the stomach again with an uppercut without mercy. Cough. After being hit twice in a row on the same place, even Bakugo coughed up a mouthful of blood, and he was sent flying and fell to the ground. What a tenacious willpower, to be able to get up after such a heavy blow. I was shocked. Million moved his hands and feet, and said very casually, "It's amazing. It's easy to knock down Ka-chan with 2 punches, and, that Quirks, is it a penetrating type? It's so strong. That senior can hit Ka-chan with 2 punches, and the speed of punching is comparable to that of Rikido, physical fitness is far above me, and the tricky Quirks can't fight alone." As soon as Green Valley's footsteps moved, Onforal's full coverage was activated instantly, and it rushed towards Million in an instant. Is it an active attack again? Million looked at the rushing Green Valley with a calm expression on his face. Shua. Green Valley swept away with 1 blow, and Million and Green Valley seemed to be completely separated from each other. Although they could see each other, they couldn't touch each other at all. Then, as usual, Million aimed at Green Valley's abdomen and punched it out. However, boom, Green Valley covered his abdomen with his hands, directly parrying Million's fist, and then flew upside down with his strength, and landed beside Bakugo, who was on the ground, and the whole person was on the street after several consecutive vertical jumps. He left here quickly. Wanwan watched Bakugo jump up to the high-rise Green Valley with a few vertical leaps. His eyes could not help showing a look of surprise. It was predicted in advance that I would attack the abdomen, and then I made a plan. Resist before attacking, and use your strength to save your companions. Because it would be very dangerous to attack other parts of the human body with his punching power. Generally speaking, he would choose a position that is soft like the human abdomen, but can defeat the enemy with 1 blow without causing serious injuries. It's really interesting that I can analyze my attack pattern with just 2 punches. Wanwan raised his eyebrows, with a smile on his face. Should like him. Let me go. In the corner of the city simulation examination room, Bakugo struggled to fall off Green Valley with a face full of anger, and fell directly on the street, struggling to get up. No way, Ka-chan, you are still injured. Green Valley paused, and hurriedly wanted to come over to help Bakugo. Don't touch me. Bakugo opened Green Valley's hands with a wave of his hand, gritted his teeth, stood up against the wall, turned around and walked towards the direction he came from. Ka-jong. Lu Jiyu shouted quickly, seeing Bakugo's movements. Senior Tong Xing will catch up soon, and you haven't recovered from your injuries yet. Shut up. Bakugo growled, gritted his teeth with anger on his face. That guy is ignoring me, I must kill him. Green Valley looked at Bakugo, who was going away. His face was a bit at a loss, and Fu Ling was so concerned that he blurted out a sentence, "You can't beat him." Bakugo paused, turned around stiffly and looked at Green Valley, with a ferocious expression on his face. You said I can't beat him. ... That's right. Lu Jiyu trembled first, then gritted his teeth, and took a step forward and shouted loudly, isn't the scene just now a good proof? 2 punches, senior accelerators, just 2 punches made Ka sauce, you still can't stand still. Senior Tong's Quirks is unclear, but from the current point of view, Quirks is penetrating. With that kind of heavy punch, 1-on-1, it is difficult for any of us to be the opponent of Senior Tong. Green Valley. He stared at Bakugo and said in a deep voice. It's not difficult, but it will definitely not be my opponent. Million's voice sounded from one side. Green Valley and Bakugo reacted instantly, jumped in the opposite direction, and looked over there vigilantly. From one side of the wall, Million came out with a serious face, staring at Green Valley. Staring at me again. Lu Jiyu shuddered, his eyes showed a look of vigilance. From just now, Million's gaze has been on him, completely ignoring him. Ka-jong. Lu Gu's heart was shocked, and he suddenly understood something, and quickly turned his head to look. Sure enough, Million has been watching Green Valley, ignoring Bakugo's actions, which made Bakugo's face full of anger. Senior Tongshuan has been staring at me for the purpose of angering Ka-jong. LVGU instantly understood. Click. Before Green Valley could speak, Bakugo rushed towards Million regardless of his injuries. Sure enough, Million looked at the rushing Bakugo out of the corner of his eyes, and said in his heart, although it looks irritable, it is actually extremely calm, except, when I was with Green Valley, only you need to pay attention to Green Valley all the time, showing a look of ignorance which can easily irritate him. Bakugo rushed forward with an angry face, and he didn't have any intention of holding back his hands, but there is no doubt that all the attacks were passed through Million's body, whether it was punches or explosions. Drink! Wanwan yelled violently, and his right hand instantly turned into an afterimage and swung towards Bakugo's abdomen. Boom! Bakugo parried with both hands in front of him, directly blocking Million's heavy punch. You really, look down on me. Enduring the pain, Bakugo rolled his hands and grabbed Beifeng's fist directly. Have you been caught? Wanwan raised his brows. As expected, they are all elites. Just once, they can find a way to deal with him, and they can counterattack when attacking, and use his heavy punch that Green Valley discovered just now. Track. Boom. The sweat stains on Bakugo's palm exploded instantly at close range. The severe punishment and confusion of the explosion diffused, making it difficult to see what happened in it. Ka Zhang. A look of worry flashed across Lu Gu's face, and he wanted to rush forward in an instant. However, a figure flew out of the black smoke in an instant. It's Bakugo. As soon as Green Valley's eyes moved, One for All was fully covered, and he rushed up in an instant, catching Bakugo, who flew out. It's a heavy blow to the abdomen again. With just one glance, Green Valley instantly saw the injury on Bakugo's body. I shouldn't have said that you can't activate quirks when you were caught. In the black smoke, a figure of 11,000 people walked out of it, walking towards Green Valley with an expressionless face. Valley pressure to go. So strong. Hugging Bakugo, Green Valley moved his feet, and a look of solemnity flashed in his eyes. However, that's right again. Looking at the Green Valley in front of him, Wanwan secretly said in his heart. LVGU Izuku has a positive and optimistic personality, full of compassion, good at thinking when fighting, is a full-fledged brain, but at the same time, too good at thinking, only need to show enough pressure and strength, and there are wounded people present, can make the opponent's mind start to think, and make his actions fall into a passive state. It's really good. He knows the character and behavior of his students like the back of his hand, and he is really a responsible teacher. Eraser. Wanwan sighed secretly in his heart. These are all before this exam. He got detailed information about his two opponents from Aizawa Shota, and at the same time, he also got this. Aizawa Shota, please. Come on. A serious look flashed across Million's face, looking at the Green Valley in front of him. Let me tell you how weak I really am. It's cruel, but let me tell you how weak I really am. Million's eyes were extremely firm. As an off-campus intern and about to become a formal professional hero, he deeply understands this how the world is. And the task given to him by the school has much effect on the growth of the students. There is only one battle. Green Valley looked at Million in front of him, and Bakugo, who had lost his fighting ability, forced himself to calm down, and One for All fully covered and activated instantly. 8%. The green arc on Green Valley's body leapt, instantly raising the power of One for All to the limit it could control. Whoosh! The foot of Green Valley swayed suddenly, and rushed directly towards Million. What a quick move! Wanwan narrowed his eyes slightly, looking at the rushing Green Valley. A trace of solemnity flashed in his eyes. We're going to do it for real. Laugh! The kick that flew up in the air landed on Kongchu without a doubt, passed through Wanwan's body, and landed on the ground. But Green Valley, who had been mentally prepared for a long time, did not stop, and jumped up suddenly at the moment of landing. With some once again, he slammed into the Million. Although I can't hit me, I just keep getting beaten like this. Wanwan looked at the rushing Green Valley seriously, and suddenly stretched out two fingers with his right hand, and inserted his eyes. Looking at the two fingers that appeared in front of his eyes almost instantly, Lu Gu closed his eyes instinctively, and put his hands on his head to defend. Boom! Facing the Green Valley with the empty door open, Wanwan's fist firmly imprinted on the opponent's stomach. Ka Euro A Euro A Euro. Lu Jiyu, who flew upside down, stared at her eyes, and opened her mouth directly, screaming silently. Although I felt this Rikido when he was parrying just now, but he really got punched to understand why Bakugo loses his combat power after 2 or 3 punches. With the enhancement of Onforal's full coverage, in midair, Green Valley forcibly controlled his body and regained his balance. He fell to the ground with his hands on his stomach, and the muscles on his face twitched uncontrollably. This was really too painful. Can you still bear it? Then I will increase the punch. Wanwan looked at the landed Green Valley, and yelled a reminder to rush over. Isn't he the strongest Rikido? Lu Gu's face was really green, he couldn't hit someone, and it still hurt so much after being beaten, he really wanted to shout, "There is a trick here." However, Million, who rushed over, quickly disappeared from Green Valley's eyes in an instant. Disappeared. Lu Jiyu, who had just endured the pain and made defensive preparations, looked at the empty alley with a look of surprise. Laugh. Behind Green Valley, Million's figure suddenly appeared here, and then, he punched out. At this time, feeling the movement from behind, Lu Jiyu wanted to avoid it instantly. But at that moment, Million's fist appeared in the position that Green Valley wanted to avoid. Perfect fit. Green Valley sent his stomach to Million's fist, and then the whole person flew out more than 10 meters away and fell heavily on the ground. Yes, Million told Green Valley with the facts, "I did not cheat on Million." Bakugo's voice sounded again in the alley, and Bakugo, who had fallen to the ground twice, gritted his teeth and got up from the ground, looking at Tong Xingwan in front of him with a hideous face. "Go to hell." Quote. Bakugo's right hand is aimed at Million, and his left hand is directly on the pull ring, without hesitation. Pull. A terrifying explosion erupted in this small alley in an instant, smoke and dust billowed, and the flames covered everything. Most of the street was destroyed in an instant and turned into ruins. Using this kind of trick in the city is absolutely not allowed for professional heroes. A million voices sounded behind Bakugo, and he punched out at the same time. "No one's ruined the city, I can fight as I want." Bakugo roared, and the palm of his left hand exploded without warning, directly driving his body to slam back. The two passed through. Bakugo turned 720 degrees continuously in midair and then landed on the ground. He raised his head sharply, looked at Wanwan with a ferocious face, rushed forward with force under his feet, and yelled loudly, "Next, you won't be allowed to attack." Chance. I won't let me have a chance to attack. There was a smile in Wanwan's eyes, but it disappeared after that. He is now playing the image of a serious and mean senior. It won't give you a chance to attack. Wanwan counterattacked, clenched his right fist and smashed directly towards Bakugo. A strange duel took place. Obviously, both of them are attacking with almost all their strength, but even if there is no collision, it seems that two people from different time and space are practicing martial arts on their respective 1-acre 3-point land, rather than fighting with others. In midair, relying on the convenience of blasting quirks and excellent physical ability, Bakugo has been maintaining a strong attack state. Even if a million attacks came to him, he resisted the idea of a dodging. Kicking back, it was a desperate gesture. But, I can't tell if Million's attack is true or not, I can't tell if Million's real body is fake, I can't judge Million's tactical thinking, after all, which one is he still passive? No wonder Eraser would ask me so much. This kind of powerful quirks, excellent motor nerves, and that always domineering posture, compared to growing up with praise all the time, arrogance is inevitable. Quote. The high-speed fight had been going on for almost a minute, but throughout, he never made a single real attack, instead watching Bakugo. Perhaps, you have always been the best among the children of the same age or even older around you. Wanwan suddenly said, standing still and letting Bakugo attack, but he just watched seriously Bakugo. Bakugo frowned, but his hands didn't seem to stop attacking at all. But, here is Xiangying, there is no shortage of the Heroic Academy, and every year, there are extremely excellent professional heroes stepping into the society, or excellent heroes seeds entering the campus. What are you proud of? Are you proud that you are the only one who will attack your companions? Wanwan said with a blank face. It's just that Xiangying is like this. A society that is countless times bigger than Xiangying, and a world that is countless times bigger than Neon. How much do you really know? What is your pride? Just like now. Million suddenly swung a punch as fast as lightning, directly imprinted on Bakugo's abdomen, and sent him flying. Even the moment Million's fist hit Bakugo, Bakugo's right leg was still coming out of Million's head. Swiped, but it didn't do anything at all. As long as I think, I can easily crush you, you can't even touch my hair. Where does your pride come from? Wanwan stared blankly and struggled to climb up. Get up, Bakugo. The voice is not loud, and the tone is extremely flat, but in Bakugo's ears, especially in front of Green Valley, these words are undoubtedly sharp knives, piercing through his chest mercilessly. At this moment, Bakugo thought of Li Tian, the back that he couldn't touch no matter how hard he tried, and Hong and Green Valley, who were walking side by side beside him and had already pulled his shoulders. Have you finished? Struggling, he staggered up from the ground. Bakugo's eyes were red, and there was a trace of blood in the corners of his eyes. Finish, then die to me. Both palms exploded suddenly, and the whole person rushed towards Million directly under the force of the explosion wind. It's really stubborn. And everyone is the same. Looking at Bakugo in front of him, and Green Valley, who was also struggling to stand up beside him, Million felt helpless silently in his heart, but he didn't show any mercy when he made a move. Time flies by. Before I knew it, half an hour of the final exam had passed. Million walked out of the examination room unscathed, not even aggravated. In the examination room, no matter whether it was Bang 900 How or Green Valley, both of them were covered with bruises, but the injuries were not serious. After all, each punch of Million left there is no room for it, and these injuries are nothing more than scratches from falls every time they are knocked out. However, compared to the insignificant injuries on the body, the wound left in the hearts of the two is the most painful and difficult to heal. After a while, the two got up without saying a word, with gloomy faces, and staggered towards the exit. The meeting place of the teachers is not far away. Million, how is it? Aizawa Shota, who had been waiting for a long time, looked at the approaching Million and asked in a deep voice. I've read all the lines that the teacher gave me, and beat them for half an hour. Million patted his stiff cheek helplessly. Really, it's really uncomfortable for him to pretend to be a bad guy. That's good. Aizawa Shota nodded, visibly relieved. Teacher, can you not entrust this kind of teaching task to me next time? I'm really not suitable to play the villain. Million complained with a look of grievance on his face. He was obviously so cheerful, humorous and handsome, but the result and the first impression left by the students when they met for the first time turned out to be like this. If possible, I want to do it myself. Aizawa Shota glanced at Wanwan. The key is not whether it is suitable or not, but that there is no one else. Ah, Million looked helpless. He obviously understood this, although he almost crushed the battle with those two, but half an hour of battle, no matter it was quirks, skill, tactics, will, courage, he has fully realized it. Those two people are very frustrated now. I hope you can enlighten them, teacher. Goodbye, teacher. Million turned and left after saying a word. At the same time, for Bakugo and Green Valley, no, it should be said that everyone in Class A prayed silently. It is really lucky and unfortunate to have such a teacher on the booth. Ah, Bakugo and Green Valley, you two lost. In the bus of Class A, there were inconceivable exclamations from the students. It could almost be said that the two top-notch fighters in Class A lost and failed the final exam. In the bus, Bakugo looked out of the window with a displeased face, while Green Valley looked embarrassing. With the presence of a young girl, the injuries on the two of them have long since left no traces, but in a word, compared to their bodies, the injuries on their hearts are the most serious and difficult to heal. Senior Accelerator is really too strong, beyond imagination. As he said that, Lu Jiyu couldn't help clenching his fists tightly, with a dignified expression on his face. On the other hand, Bakugo twitched his lips, but he didn't intend to refute at all. It's just that anyone can clearly see the unwillingness on his face. Hey, let Bakugo have nothing to say. Is that senior really that strong? Kirishima couldn't help but click his tongue. Very strong. I even feel that senior is stronger than the teachers in the school. Green Valley couldn't help but said. Better than the teachers. Hello, Green Valley, the teachers in our school are all real professional heroes, and they are all senior heroes. The students are better than the teachers. It's too much. Zero endured can't stop talking. In the exam, he was put in by Teacher Midnight. Students are better than teachers, isn't there any in our class? Bakugo interrupted with a displeased face. In an instant, everyone's eyes turned to Li Tian in unison. Why are you looking at me? I'm born with nothing to do, so I'm going to blame me. Li Tian spread his hands, and said with a look of embarrassment. Not A. Forget about Li Tian. A euro, he's just a bug. Putao said enviously. As for the bug, I feel the same for Senior Accelerator. Lu Jiyu said helplessly. Although Senior didn't explain it, but according to my observation, Senior Accelerator's quirks should penetrate, and can penetrate all substances, human bodies and attacks. Whether it's my fists or Bakugo's explosion, it's useless, and the body is also worn out. The practice is very powerful. Just a single punch can make people unable to stand up. The speed of the punch is almost invisible. The combat experience is also rich and scary, and you can teleport through quirks. Following Green Valley's explanation, everyone present counted as one, and the expression on his face gradually solidified. I'm going, this is too perverted. Isn't this invincible? Cheat, this is definitely another cheater. On the bus of Class A group of students were in a panic, and all of them shouted with wide eyes. After all, according to Green Valley, no matter how you listen to it, this quirks is too invincible. Just like. Cut. Li Tian curled his lips, feeling the gazes on his body. You are completely wrong. Li Tian withdrew his gaze from the window, and said casually, Million, his ability to penetrate quirks is not powerful at all. Hearing Li Tian's words, there was a moment of silence on the bus, and then everyone's reactions exploded instantly. Kirishima's eyes widened, with a look of disbelief. Hey, aren't these quirks powerful yet? The corner of Kaminari's mouth twitched, with a helpless expression on his face. Brother, do you have any misunderstandings about the concept of power? It's true that it's not strong, it's just invincible. Kutao looked at the sky with a lonely expression. Tokiyami couldn't help but interjected, you can't ask people by the standards of gods or demons. Not only the boys, but even the girls couldn't help but look at Li Tian suspiciously, wondering why Li Tian would say such words. Penetrates quirks, not powerful. Are you kidding me? This is invincible, okay. Looking at a group of classmates who were frying pots, Li Tian was speechless. Can't you finish listening and finish talking? Can't. A group of people who were dazzled by jealousy said in unison. After the joke, Mr. Li Tian, A-euro, what do you mean that Senior Tongxing's quirks are not strong? Green Valley couldn't help asking the first question, as he had been fighting being hand-to-hand beaten with Million for half an hour, but the most curious. Oh, by the way, there is also a Bakugo who secretly pricked up his ears. That's right, no matter how you look at it, this penetrating quirks is super powerful. The others also looked at Li Tian, A-euro, all of them becoming curious. Li Tian didn't mean to be tricky on purpose, so he opened his mouth in the face of everyone's curious eyes. Penetrating quirks is not the only thing you know about being invincible. When you activate this quirks, its entire body will feel penetrate anything, including but not limited to substances, human bodies, and attacks mentioned by Green Valley. The teleportation is to launch quirks to penetrate the ground, and then adjust the direction to cancel the quirks. The illusion of teleportation caused by being squeezed out by the ground is essentially to penetrate the quirks. Then isn't this super strong? Yi Yin, who was on the side, couldn't help asking. Yes, it looks and sounds very strong, even as invincible as you said, but pay attention, when quirks is activated, its entire body will penetrate everything. It is 2 holes. Li Tian shook his head and said. All, Yaoyorozu Wan murmured, suddenly seemed to understand something. A look of shock flashed across his face. He looked at Li Tian and couldn't help but said, Student Li Tian, A-euro, it's possible that all penetration means all everything. That's right. Li Tian nodded, and it was Yaoyorozu Wan who responded the fastest. When penetrating quirks is activated, Senior Tong's internal organs can't work, because the air will penetrate through it. Similarly, the vibration will penetrate the eardrum, and no sound will be heard, and the light will penetrate the retina, and nothing will be seen. Things, sound, light, perception of breathing, everything is gone. The only thing I can feel is the feeling of my own weight constantly sinking. Li Tian said in a deep voice. No way, how could such a thing happen? True and false. After listening to Li Tian's explanation, all the people present were not surprised or shocked. For example, if Senior Tong wants to use quirks to simply pass through a wall, he needs to leave his right foot outside the wall, then use quirks to pass through the rest of his body, then touch the quirks with his left foot and land, and then use quirks with his right foot to pass through. The extremely cumbersome steps of going over the wall. Li Tian said lightly. In fact, he couldn't help admiring Million. A penetrating quirks with such serious sequelae that is difficult to control can suddenly become that kind of almost invincible ability. If it was in the previous life, then this is an inspirational man created, it's just a character, but now in this real world, this is a wizard with extremely firm will, hard work and sweat. On the bus, Hiroshi, Iida, Kirishima, Kaminari, Tokiyami, Shoji, Kutao, Shiro, Ojiro, Sato, Aoyama, Yiyin, Yaoyorozu Wan, Uraraka, Ashido, Asui, Jiro. Green Valley and Bakugo, the whole bus on the ground, everyone was shocked, even shocked. Some people even couldn't help suspecting that Li Tian was lying, but they were immediately denied. Although Li Tian was extremely black-bellied, he wouldn't be able to deceive them with such a thing. It's not the quirks who are powerful, but the person, the million. Li Tian said. Although it's a bit exaggerated, among the people who know Million, some people have commented on him based on their own experience. As far as he knows, including all professional heroes, Million is the closest to the retired number 1 All Might people. Closest to Almighty people, that guy. The eyes of Green Valley and Bakugo tightened at the same time. As crazy European chefs, they are so sensitive to the word All Might that they need to be sensitive. Coupled with what Li Tian said just now, Million's image has gradually become fuller. Although they didn't want to, the image of Million couldn't help appearing in the minds of both of them, and it was deeply embedded in their minds. So, you are very lucky. Li Tian changed the subject and looked at LVGU and Bakugo. Among the heroes, it can be said that the person I want to fight the most is Million, and that kind of opponent fighting, you must be able to accumulate a huge amount of combat experience, but the school actually arranged him into your combination. I am really unfortunate. I'm really lucky. The corner of Jiro's mouth twitched slightly, and he couldn't help but thank God silently in his heart. Are you lucky? Hearing Li Tian's words, Green Valley and Bakugo couldn't help but think. Your sister. Lucky hammer. Those half an hour of tragic memory plus those heart-piercing words, that is hell at all, okay. Looking at the envious eyes of several classmates who didn't understand, both of LVGU and Bakugo's faces were frighteningly dark. Heroic campus. The bus carrying the students drove in, waiting for Aizawa Shota to meet the students in his class. Aizawa Shota's footsteps faltered, looking at his own student who was walking towards him, a look of surprise flashed in his eyes. Is this, not being hit? No, this is completely thinking about it. The previous blows have all turned into fighting spirit. Aizawa Shota looked at the light shining in his student's eyes, and silently thought about it in his heart. The original lines were retracted. After knowing the whole story, Aizawa Shota was silent for 3 seconds, and then. Aizawa Shota. Li Tian, a euro, it's so easy to use. Get Zhao Zhao in the classroom. The 7 people who passed the final exam this time are Li Tian, a euro Jiro, Hong, Yaoyorozu Wan, Iida, Ojiro, and Mineta. The other 13 people failed the actual combat test. Aizawa Shota declared expressionlessly standing on the podium. In the audience, more than half of the people were frowning. Out of 20 students, only 7 passed the exam. This may be the lowest passing rate of the final exam in the history of Xiangying School. What's more important, the summer camp is completely ruined. So, for the eliminated students, it's a pity that they didn't pass. So, this forest training camp, everyone will participate together. What? The classroom exploded in an instant, and the ceiling was almost lifted. The previous words were to stimulate your full potential, which is the so-called reasonable hypocrisy. Shangji Dita showed a disobedient smile on his face. Yeah, we can go to the camp in the woods together. A test of courage. Lawsuit. Valley. Fireworks. Quote. Mixed bathing. Hot spring. Mixed bathing. Looking at a group of students excitedly shouting and discussing in the classroom, Aizawa Shota on the podium silently took back what he was going to talk about next, which was not a camp in the forest but a hell-style special training in the forest. Well, let's make it a surprise for everyone. Aizawa Shota silently decided to publish it. Kyoto, Shengjing District, still wearing the Savitar armor that covered the whole body, standing on the top roof of a tall building, Li Tian looked at the bank card he just got in his hand, and raised his eyebrows involuntarily. After the final exam, the forest training will naturally not start so quickly. And Li Tian, a euro who had itchy hands, couldn't help but was ready to make waves again. As for bank cards, it was placed here in advance by someone, and then someone guided Li Tian, a euro or in other words, directed, Savitar, to come and get it. Together with this card, there is also this note, on which is written the password of this card, as well as a detailed introduction of the source of funds and some conditions. Although the identity was not clearly stated, but depending on the conditions, it should be the police. No. It cannot be called the police, it is the so-called sincerity of the official. There is a fairly large amount of funds in this card. Probably in order to show sincerity, this bank card was specially added in addition to those conditions. Of course, the account number and appropriation of this card will definitely not appear in any official related institutions, that is to say, this is a sum of money that has nothing to do with the official. As for the so-called conditions, it is a series of conditions that will not be hunted down by professional heroes, arrested by the police, or targeted by the government, making Savitar a cute and charming villain. Of course, the note also vaguely mentioned that it is best not to have that kind of serious death scale again, and try not to kill even the villains, otherwise, Savitar will be listed as the real villains. At that time, all the conditions for the cute and charming villains that were discussed before will naturally be unconditionally nullified. At the end of the note is written to welcome Savita to take the professional heroes exam and become a real professional heroes. Of course, no matter how dull Li Tian is, he still understands that this welcome is definitely not a welcome for Savitar, but a welcome for Li Tian himself, who has not been exposed under Savitar's armor. Even though they have already been defined as villains, in the end they even sent him an invitation to a professional although it was only secretly, Li Tian couldn't help but be amazed. This official's tolerance for himself is too high. Could it be that you want to use money to bind a powerful combat force so that you don't fall to the villains? Li Tian walked to the edge of the rooftop with his bank card, looked at the bright city in front of him, and said in a deep voice up. But it shouldn't be. Leaving aside the fact that his disguised Savitar doesn't mean he's short of money, let's just say that his combat prowess shouldn't be to the point where the officials are afraid and have to make such a compromise. Although it looks inconspicuous, in this chaotic era, if the government only compromises blindly, it is absolutely impossible to gain a foothold in this era, let alone maintain domestic order and stability. But what Li Tian didn't know was that the strength and combat power he showed was indeed not to that level, but it was not far behind. In addition to Li Tian's Savitar credit and word of mouth, it would be enough. Although Savitar itself is not officially recognized, its style of conduct is indeed chivalrous. In addition to the operation in Osaka Bay, a trafficking group involving thousands of people was arrested. Afterwards, according to the confession of the villains who survived the other party or other means, how many designated villains gangs can be dug out from all over the country, even the villains who have not entered the official line of sight will definitely not be a small amount. Whether it is the arrest of a large number of villains, or the killing of chickens and monkeys against other villains' organizations, this is extremely conducive to the stability of the situation. Not to mention, that night, by the way, he cut off the tail of a well-known villains organization in the world, which shocked the International Villains Organization and those who were attacked by Li Tian. Thousands of abducted women were rescued. This one by one, coupled with not weak strength and unknown identity, is enough to make the official high level feel troublesome. Shooting people in violation of the use of quirks is undoubtedly an act of villains, but single-handedly saved a large number of people. This is like in the United States in the old calendar. Although the country does not ban guns, it is absolutely forbidden for non-official personnel to carry guns and bullets on the street, but one person shot and killed one by one in the whole street a lunatic who planted a bomb on the ground and was ready to take a group of people to hell with him, counting down tens of seconds. He took out his pistol, fired a shot, and gave the opponent a headshot. The bomb did not detonate, the terrorist died, and hundreds of people were rescued safely. But he himself undoubtedly broke the law, not only with a loaded pistol, but also openly shot and killed people on the street. Although there are some discrepancies, the nature of what Savitar does is very similar. As for the casualties of the villains, Savitar's methods were brutal. That's a better explanation. No one thinks that in the siege of hundreds of villains, Savitar can protect a large number of hostages without killing anyone. Breaking the law is indeed breaking the law, but there is nothing more than human nature outside the law. Savitar completely annihilated the villains and subdued them, and perfectly ensured that no innocent hostages were harmed. This achievement alone is enough to offset most of the unfavorable fishing boats that may conquer Savitar's ruthless means. After all, the dead are the most disgusting villains. It is easy to push the direction of the fishing boat to a direction that is not good for the police official or even the professional heroes. An extremely unfavorable tricky news broke out. Of course, it must be strictly covered. Although it is not uncontrollable, it is not better to directly kill the root cause than to control the outbreak of conflicts. And the official high-level officials also saw this, so they had this attitude of trying to stabilize Li Tian as much as possible. The inside story of this is naturally not something that Li Tian, a newcomer Xiaoming, can understand, but Li Tian will not think about things that cannot be figured out, especially things that are difficult to get an answer to. As long as the current result is not harmful to him in his eyes, it doesn't matter. Originally, the identity of Sawada was just a vest that Li Tian appeared in order to train his skills and accumulate experience. No matter what kind of calculations there are, as long as it does not involve his body, the big deal is to give up the identity of Sawada. It's not that there is no Savita. What will happen to Li Tian? The big deal is to come out with a different vest. What a lot of vests from Visata and Tasavi. If Li Tian is willing, put a black bat on himself. Let's also have a real dark heroes, not the same. After thinking about it, Li Tian, no, Savitar threw away the bank card in his hand, and directly inserted it into the concrete wall on the edge of the roof. It's a pity, so much money, at least 3 to 5 years will not have to worry about food. Li Tian shook his head and sighed secretly. Although he was short of money, he was not stupid enough to keep such unknown things by his side. Not to mention using that card to spend, so that officials can freely investigate his consumption records, and even the location of consumption, etc. When the Speed Force was activated, the blue light of the Savitar armor flickered again, and his knees moved slightly. Li Tian jumped up and jumped directly towards the top of the slightly shorter building opposite. Several times in succession, Li Tian's figure disappeared in the vast sea of a night. After Li Tian left for a long time, on the edge of the roof, not far from the bank card inserted into the floor in the darkness, a bean-sized pebble-like thing moved. Looking closer, it turned out to be a figure the size of a bean, and it was growing rapidly. Call. This is a female heroes, and it is the completely opposite female heroes of Quirks and Li Tian's family who shrinks Quirks, just like Ant-Man in Marvel. It's so thrilling, is that the ruthless person who slaughtered hundreds of villains by himself. It's really terrifying. I almost couldn't breathe. The female heroes quickly. He looked at the bank card at his feet in the size of an ordinary person, patted his chest and opened his mouth with joy, and there was still a touch of panic on his small face that hadn't faded away. You have such an aura, people didn't realize how good you are. A voice of complaint came from the earphone of the female heroes. Mouth, he found me. When he left in the end, he looked at me affectionately. And that bank card was a warning to me. Ant Girl said with righteous words on her face. Don't dream, if someone finds out about you, they will run over you to death with one kick and warn you. You call that thing that is more than 1 meter away from you a warning, that's it, don't be naughty, pack up and come back quickly. The person on the other end of the phone was full of impatience. HMPH. Ant Girl was full of anger, but she tidied up her hands and feet quickly. She is the one who is responsible for sending the bank card and the note. By the way, she will monitor, observe this, Savis, and see if she can find a chance to check the other party's real identity. Pity. From the first step, she failed. That, Savis, deserves to have slaughtered hundreds of villains with his own strength. The breathtaking courage of the other party, the other party's vigilance is too high, she can't find it at all, to the opportunity approach. Not to mention that the other party inexplicably walked to the edge of the rooftop after taking the bank card, and only stopped for a short while, so she didn't have time to catch up with him. However, Ant Girl's face became serious involuntarily. He's really handsome. Chapter 91. Relying on his agility and increased speed, Li Tian parkoured forward at an extremely fast speed between tall buildings. Sure enough, before I learned how to use the Speed Force to pass through walls, proper parkour movements have a significant effect on improving my speed. On the roof of a tall building, Li Tian jumped and rolled from a rock turned over on the pier. The movement was clean and neat without the slightest sloppy movement, and the speed was surprisingly fast. Under Savitar's armor, a smile appeared on Li Tian's face. This was what Cowboy told him when he was at Best Jeanist after he learned that his whole body moves faster, not just running fast. However, this is not very useful for Li Tian, who is using the super speed mode, because his super speed has already reached the level of running regardless of gravity. Much faster. But, for Savitar, who only uses the extreme speed mode, the cost is too much. That's an illegal transaction. Li Tian stopped leaping between the tall buildings. Although he maintained the super fast speed mode, Li Tian's dynamic vision and nerve response were even better than several times strength of. Therefore, although the movements of Savitar were extremely fast, they did not slacken their observation of the surroundings. Even in the corner of the alley below, those inconspicuous, 17 or 18 strong men. Did you bring the goods? Erluzzi looked nervously at the men in black suits in front of him and asked. Of course I brought it. Where's the money? A middle-aged fat man in a black suit of equal height and length asked with a straight face. Here is the money. Erluzzi lifted the box in his right hand. With his skill, the faces of the dozen or so ruffians showed nervous expressions at the same time, wary of those men in black. This is all their belongings. Open it, the middle-aged fat man ordered. Let's see the goods first. Erluzzi directly shook his head and refused. Although they are just punks, doing precarious business every day, they still have some brains. Yeah, the middle-aged fat man raised his brows, looking submissively in front of him, but with a firm bum in his eyes. Show them the goods. Yes, with the skill of a middle-aged fat man, a tall man in a black suit responded, picked up the suitcase in his hand, and then opened it to show those bums. Look, authentic Bald Eagle products. One medicine is effective for at least 2 hours. These medicines are enough for you to have a big fight, the middle-aged fat man said with a grin. The dozen or so hooligans looked at the bright red bottle in the suitcase, with salivation on their faces, and their eyes were extremely earnest. This is something that carries their future. Okay, I have seen the goods, take out the money. The middle-aged fat man raised his hand and closed the box directly, and said to several people. Ergo. Erluzzi withdrew his earnest gaze, but the sleepiness on his face was not concealed in the slightest. Among the dozen or so hooligans, a figure came out. Oh, seeing that the bum didn't take out the box in his hands, the black suits called someone over instead, and couldn't help frowning slightly, even though they knew that the dozen or so people in front of them were not worth mentioning, but still vigilant. The ruffian known as Ergo came out, took out a big paper bag from his pocket, opened it and showed it. All the money is here. Those drug sellers in black suits cautiously took a look, and found that they were indeed stacks of banknotes. Seeing the actions of those men in black suits, a smug flash of pride flashed across the face of the bum, and he said, Hey, this money is all our belongings, so we can't just lie down. Very well, you are very clever. A look of disdain flashed in the eyes of the fat middle-aged man, but he gave a compliment in his mouth. He waved his hand, and the subordinates at the side came forward with the box and handed it to the rogue of the second dog, and the second dog smiled and handed over the money bag in his hand. Passed it over, and grabbed the suitcase with the other hand. Just when the two were about to exchange. Look, what I found. It's a sinful trading scene. The intruding sound made both parties vigilant at the same time, and the transaction did not continue. The drug seller quickly backed away and retreated among his companions, while the second dog stood there blankly, confused. The location chosen by the two groups of people is not an abandoned area. There is a brightly lit Dama road a street or two away, but this kind of dark alley is rarely visited by people at night. After a long time, it has also become a gathering place for some lawless people who dare not go to more dangerous places, but will not walk on the street openly. As a result, the number of people who will go here will be even rarer, and more local hooligans will be attracted, falling into a vicious circle. Who? The middle-aged fat man yelled violently, and immediately raised his hands in front of him, turning into two chainsaws that creaked. Those who beat you. The figure of Savita appeared at the entrance of the alley, looking at the 17 or 18 people who were almost full of boxes, including local hooligans and suit drug dealers, and rushed all the way without the slightest hesitation. Up. Before facing hundreds of vicious villains, he didn't hesitate at all. These dozen or so people are not enough for him to warm up. Ping ping pong pong. A few seconds later, more than a dozen people all fell to the ground, rolling and wailing all over the ground, as did the men in black suits who looked like full-fledged drug dealers. There is no one who can fight, a bunch of cowards. Li Tian curled his lips and looked at the dozens of people lying on the ground with disdain. There is no sense of shock at all. Li Tian took a few steps forward, picked up the medicine box and the money bag, and looked at it casually. Needless to say, the money bag was full of stacks of banknotes, estimated to be worth millions of dollars. First. Li Tian has no interest in these stolen money. This money is not enough for him to eat a few meals. Li Tian looked at the box curiously. He heard the conversation of these people from a distance just now, and according to his guess, what was contained in this box should be the legendary Quirks strengthening potion. It was originally developed as a drug for the salvation of weak quirks, but unfortunately, the side effects are too large, and the price is extremely expensive. In Neon, it is even more because it is listed as a banned drug, so only the underground black market has it spread. Li Tian looked a lot, his gaze fixed, then his face darkened, and he threw the box in his hand aside. Go to Nima's Bald Eagle Products. If you sell fake medicines, you need to get your outfit done first. Although I can't understand the symbols on the glass bottles, it's not in English anyway. And this kind of shoddy bottle contains Bald Eagle's the Quirk strengthening potion. How is it possible? Bald Eagles don't want to lose face. Inferior products from Southeast Asia. Li Tian instantly thought of the introduction when he saw the Quirk strengthening potion. This kind of medicine has been repeatedly banned all over the world. Apart from the best Bald Eagle products and products from several other big countries, most of them are inferior products from small places. For example, in addition to Bald Eagle products, most of the Neon products are inferior products from Southeast Asia. At most, the effect is only 10 or 20 minutes long, and the after effects are serious enough to kill. 0. Although few people come to this alley, but the street is not far away, the voice here has naturally been spread, and someone has already called the police and called the professional hero S. In less than a minute, the professional hero S in charge of this area has rushed over. But what caught his eyes was a group of hooligans rolling on the ground with their stomachs in their arms, a large bag of banknotes, and an open box. This is, after all, he is also a professional hero S. The scene in front of him instantly made him understand what was going on. This is an illegal transaction that was bumped into by someone with a heart, and then I learned a lesson from it. It's this kind of potion again. There have been so many things like this recently. The professional hero S contacted the police, looking at the neatly arranged 10 bottles of potion in the box, helplessly shaking his head. In the last month, he encountered this kind of potion 5 times alone, and it was used by others, and then he was hit by him for a total of 12 crimes. The quantity is even more overwhelming. On the other side, Li Tian also looked helpless. It's the 3rd time. Since the first time he encountered that group of drug dealers, Li Tian ran into this kind of business of buying and selling Quirks strengthening potion twice in succession. With so many drug sellers, aren't they afraid of fighting? Li Tian looked at the drug dealers and the men dressed as office workers who were taken away by the police with a headache. Is this getting involved in another incident? Li Tian was speechless. This time he didn't have time to deal with such troublesome things at first sight. After the final exam, about a week later, the forest camp will start. During this time, he, as the first place in the Hero Sports Festival, will also be invited to participate in the exhibition on my island. Stop by to complete the agreement with Melissa. Forget it, it's not that there are no professional heroes here in Neon, I'm just a part-time job, why worry about that? It's impossible for the professional hero here to not notice such an obvious thing, so I'll continue go find the villains to practice. Shaking his head, Li Tian made a few vertical jumps, climbed up the tall building, and then disappeared without a trace. Quirks enhancement potion. You don't need that kind of thing. In a room that seemed to be a laboratory, a voice sounded. No need. A doubtful voice sounded. In one of the instruments in the laboratory, Sigenmu sat up, moved his neck, and the green water-like nutrient solution slid down from his body. Doctor, that kind of Quirks strengthening potion can't strengthen Quirks something. It can strengthen Quirks, but only for those who are weak. In front of the computer connected to the instrument suspended by the dead handle wood, a short and fat figure spoke with disdain. This person was a doctor who had been arrested and imprisoned before, but for some reason, he appeared here at this time, and he was terrified after thinking about it. Quirks enhancement potion. In the final analysis, that kind of thing is nothing more than injecting the extracted quirks factor into the human body, causing the quirks to burst out in a short period of time. But the foreign quirks factor will not exist in the human body for a maximum of 24 hours. The current medicines, even the top products of the best bald eagle, can only last for 4 or 5 hours, and... The doctor paused, turned around and looked at Zhigeng Diao with a smile in his eyes. Although it was very unexpected, there is no doubt that Sabeo Diao's quirks have evolved greatly. In addition to the things you directly touch with your hands, the targets of indirect contact are also not immune. There is no doubt that you have become the spokesperson of the word destruction in the world. It's still far away. Zhigeng Diao ignored the doctor's compliments. His own strength, he himself knew best, looked at his own arm, test. Undoubtedly, the word destruction was born for him, but, similarly, his body couldn't bear it. My body still can't bear the quirks. Zhigeng Diao said flatly. Haha, indeed, quirks are also part of the body. No matter how strong quirks is, without a body to carry them, it is like a grass without roots. The doctor laughed, and then changed the subject and said, Quirks strengthening potion. It is to use external force to make the quirks that are part of the body expand in a short time. And now, the quirks in your body have swelled to the point where your body can't bear it. If the quirk strengthening potion is a magic medicine for those who have weak quirks and ordinary quirks, then it is no compromise for you. Poison that does not buckle. Quirks swell to the point where the body can't bear it. Zhigeng Muhang frowned involuntarily. He didn't care about what the doctor said that the quirk strengthening potion was poison to him. Since it is useless, there is no need to think about it. That's right, the evolution of the so-called body can't keep up with the evolution of quirks. The doctor nodded, and continued following the words of Zhigeng Muhang. In other words, he followed the topic he guided. With the constant change of the times, the cornerstone of the supernormal era quirks is undoubtedly constantly evolving. In the earliest days of the supernormal, there were only 1 out of 10 supernormals in the world, but now, the quirkless group it has become a minority, and it is even decreasing day by day, and the same is true for quirks, from a simple and weak ability in the earliest days, to a powerful quirks that is becoming more and more complex and ambiguous today. Compared to the evolution speed of quirks, the evolution of the human body is too slow, far from keeping up with the evolution speed of quirks, and once there are swollen quirks that cannot be accommodated by the human body, there is no doubt that the two will be out of balance. I call this strength beyond the limit of human endurance called quirks singularity, but, except for All for One, almost no one has paid attention to my theory. It seems very interesting. Niganaki scratched his chin. The body can't accommodate the bloated quirks, so it's me. That's right. The doctor nodded bluntly. Your Honkai quirks, Shigaraki, are undoubtedly the quirks singularity, and it is also the only fourth surviving quirks singularity I have found so far. Wei Si. Zhigeng Mu frowned involuntarily. The doctor didn't explain, but began to tell. During the 4th generation of supernormal, All for One and I started this research. Although it was rare, we still found 1 or 2 suspected quirks. Existence of singularities. However, things like quirks are usually awakened between the ages of 0 and 4 after human beings are born, and children in this period are undoubtedly fragile. Weak or ordinary quirks are okay, but they are too strong. The quirks are certainly a burden. There is no doubt that they all died when the child's body couldn't bear the inflated quirks, died when the young mind couldn't control the inflated quirks, and finally used the quirks too much, and the body collapsed and died. And you are the only child that All for One and I found that was still alive after awakening the inflated and powerful quirks. The doctor said calmly. Then I'm really lucky. Nigaragi didn't care and teased casually. Who are the other 3 quirks singularity who are still alive? All for One, One for All, and that brat you hate the most. The doctor said lightly. Boom. The moment the doctor's voice fell, the ground under the dead Handlewood's feet shattered directly, and a pothole with a diameter of 2 or 3 meters appeared directly on the ground. Sorry, I didn't control Rikido well. Zhigeng Muhang walked out of the hole and said in a deep voice, continue. HMPH, you are indeed the spokesperson of destruction. The doctor looked at Zhigeng Mu who walked out, and the corner of his mouth cracked into a smile. All for One, that is, your master's quirks are very strange, taking other people's quirks, and giving them to others. Every time I think that these quirks were born in that extraordinary dawn, I will be shocked. Too early, it's too early for this great quirks. A look of frenzy appeared on the doctor's face. Different from your naturally powerful quirks, IE's quirks are not naturally powerful, but after all, for one, plunders keep storing quirks in your body. IE's quirks swelled. He touched the quirk's singularity of the theoretical limit of the human body, but as he said that, there was a look of regret on the doctor's fanatical face. The reason why the limit is called the limit is the limit of the human body, the limit that cannot be broken through at all. Even if AI for one plunders as many quirks as he can, it will not be able to make the body evolve at all. If you forcibly plunder, it will only exceed the load of the body like other people, and eventually the body will collapse and die. It was also at that time that All for One and I jointly began to study how to make the evolution of the body keep up with the expanding quirks. However, at the critical juncture of the research, All Might was born. In the following you can understand the matter rather than needing me to say more. The doctor has calmed down, looking at Zhigeng Diao, and said indifferently, All Might, he used that pair of iron fists to smash the dark empire established by the teacher. In the process, it gradually became a symbol of peace. In the final battle, he and the teacher were both wounded, and they all suffered almost incurable injuries. Zhigeng Diao continued with a gloomy look. That's right. The doctor nodded. All Might, he is the second quirk's singularity, One for All, or one of the gestators of One for All. One for All. All Might is one of the breeders. Zhigeng Muhong frowned. He had never heard of such a thing. That's right, similar to your All for One quirks, One for All is also a kind of quirks that keeps getting stronger and gradually approaches the quirk's singularity, the limit of the human body. He and your teacher's the difference is that your teacher, All, strengthens himself by plundering other quirks, while One for All is conceived by one person, then passed on to the next person to be bred, and then passed on to the next person, and in the process of passing it on again and again, gradually stronger quirks. Inheritance. Really disgusting quirks. A hint of disgust flashed in Zhigeng Muhong's eyes. As long as it was related to All Might and Hero's society, he wanted to destroy it. The generation of All Might has already touched the ceiling of human beings' quirks singularity, so he can compete with your teacher All, and even be stronger than your teacher. The doctor did not hide it, and said it generously. Ulmer Special's current body can no longer continue to fight, so One for All should have been passed on. In this generation, it should transform into a powerful quirks that surpasses the limits of human beings. And it is different from your natural strength, and also different from the strength that your teacher plundered. The strength bred by this generation, although not gentle, is definitely easier to be accepted by the human body than you, even it is to allow this generation of heirs to safely break through the limits of human beings. What a lucky guy. The doctor said, showing undisguised jealousy and anger in his eyes. Toya, he and All for One have put in so much effort and sweat to break through this limit, and paid a price that ordinary people can't imagine, but they still ended in failure. In the end, someone just got selected and won everything they begged for. This, how to make him not jealous, how not to be angry. The chosen one. It's really disgusting. I really want to destroy that disgusting thing inch by inch. The corner of Zhigeng Muhong's mouth cracked, revealing a nuclear, smiling face. Ah ha 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 ha. Aha, ha, ha, the chosen one. It's really disgusting. I really want to destroy that disgusting thing inch by inch. Zhigeng Muhong's mouth cracked, revealing a nuclear look smiley. Son of the chosen. The doctor shook his head with a complex look on his face. This One for All should only be called the son of Hero S. The chosen one should be the one you hate the most. Quote. The nuclear smile on Zhigeng Diao's face froze, and an astonishing killing intent surged up in an instant, and gradually subsided after a while. Looking at the dead Handlewood hanger who had regained his composure, a flash of satisfaction flashed in the doctor's eyes, and he then said, the last person, that kid, I thought for a long time before I decided that his quirks were also inflated. One of quirks singularity, and it is the most successful one. Zhen Xuan Li Tian, quirks, has a speed that is several times the speed of sound, and can freely control the super-fast thinking reaction ability of the speed. His father, Zhen Xuan He Wei, quirks can increase his own speed for acceleration. 10 times, mu, Junzun and Mei, quarks activate the brain power, and can calculate the increase of 10 times and tens of times in an instant. The doctor said word by word, and the complex expression on his face was also more and more obvious. And Sigang Muhong beside him couldn't help but raised his brows and said in a deep voice, "Quark's marriage." "That's right." The doctor nodded. "Quark's marriage, and it's the typical, no, the most perfect fruit of a Quark's marriage. I investigated him. That kid was always quirkless until he was 15 years old and 18 years old, that is, when the other party was 15 years old, that is, in a villain's attack at the beginning of this year, both parents died, and he suffered a major blow. Awakened quirks. From the awakening of quirks to the present, the opponent's strength has grown at an incredible speed. The body of a 4-year-old child is undoubtedly unable to withstand that kind of bloated quirks, and the body of a 4-year-old child is undoubtedly unable to manipulate that kind of bloated quirks, so the opponent's quirks did not choose to awaken at the age of 4, but it's been waiting silently, waiting for the moment when the ground will break through and take root, sprout, blossom and bear fruit, but so far, the growth rate of the other party's quirks is far from reaching its end, and his body has no signs of being unable to bear it. The doctor said. The complex look on his face gradually turned into bitterness. If One for All is the crystallization of the power that has been cultivated and irrigated through the unremitting efforts of generations, the seeds of hope will not be able to bear fruit until this generation takes root. Then Li Tian, just after he was born, he may have broken through the limit of being a human being. Well, he and All for One have been researching for decades. Countless limits of human beings that have not yet been broken. How can this keep him from crying? How can he not hate? On the side, listening to the doctor's words, Sigang Muhong's brows were also frowned, but the killing intent in his eyes did not weaken in the slightest, and even became stronger than before. I didn't rescue you to hear your complaints and hatred. You can make me stronger, right? Sigang Mu Diao said lightly. Of course. The doctor reflected back. The resentment and unwillingness in his heart were suppressed by him, and the eyes that looked at Sidang Mahong in front of him regained their usual calmness. Although Sidangmu, your quirks are strong enough now, but you still have to deal with it. It is far from touching your true strength, and it is not even close to touching the ceiling of Quirk's singularity, so you still need to hone your body and mind, hone your skills, and arrive as soon as possible Quirk's singularity, this human ceiling. Then, with the help of the technology that took me decades to complete, you can completely break through this ceiling, control the true power of Honkai and become a real god of destruction standing in the world. The doctor said. His face gradually became fanatical. This is the goal he has been pursuing unremittingly all his life. Speed, what's the use of being fast? Wait until I send you into that field. Honkai is the power of the god of destruction, the kind of guy who just laughs and laughs all day long. Just turn into scum. My research, only my research is the only one that can make human beings stand on the sky, and the only one that can make people become gods. The doctor said. His whole body became excited, as if in a daze. The god of destruction. Sigang Muhong was not very excited, and sat there looking at the bewildered doctor calmly, feeling the power in his body that was about to move. During this period of time, he has been traveling all over the country, recovering the dark forces left by his teacher and some villains' organizations. Without All for One to shield him from the wind and rain, he has experienced more and seen more. Thinking too much, his thinking is no longer as naive as before, but the only thing that remains the same is, I really want to destroy this disgusting society right away. Shigaraki's smile gradually twisted. Boom! Accompanied by a huge roaring sound, a giant beast rose across the sky, and the eagle hit the sky. In this world, although the emergence of the supernormal era has inevitably led to chaos in the world, which has caused the stagnation of the era for a period of time, but anyone with insight can understand that Quirks is just a tortuous fork in this world, magical, alluring, and full of attraction, but science and technology are the future of mankind. No matter how miraculous Quirks is, it will sooner or later be dug through and captured on the road of continuous development of science, merged into this road, and become another cornerstone of human civilization. And now, but the future world. Even in the future, it's too exaggerated for this kind of civil aviation airliner to be able to cruise at supersonic speed casually. Li Tian complained speechlessly. This speed is almost catching up to 1/5 of his speed. Flash, don't want to lose face. Haha, it's been a long time since I took a plane to my island and it's still so fast. By the window of the plane, All Might sighed with emotion as he looked out the window at the distant scenery that was rapidly receding. It turns out that this is the plane of my island. Not all planes in this world are so fast. Li Tian breathed a sigh of relief. To put it bluntly, my island is the most technologically advanced place in the British world, not one of them. And the plane on my island is naturally the most advanced civil aviation airliner in the world. Even if it is the most advanced, it is still a civil aviation airliner, breaking through the speed of sound casually. Flash, don't want to lose face or even have a lining. Practice more when you get back. If you don't get rid of him 10 times, 20 times, I will, just, eat 10 bowls of rice less. Li Tian looked out the window, bored and silently irritated. Well, can I really go to my island together? Didn't you invite me? Seeing the plane take off, Green Valley silently raised his hand and said submissively. It's already at this time, do you still want to go on? Li Tian looked at Lu Gu's obedient look, and couldn't help feeling a headache. He really wants to help All Might cultivate this disciple, to cultivate this next symbol of peace, but I don't know if it's because Li Tian stole too many scenes from the other side, and the other side has endured too little training. So far this is awkward, his character hasn't changed yet. However, under the double training of Li Tian and All Might, at least the problem of crying at every turn has been greatly improved. My island. It is a man-made and movable sea city. It wanders in the Pacific Ocean for many years. Its location is uncertain. There are more than 10,000 scientists and their families living in it. That is, the city with the lowest crime rate in the world. Is that my island? It's so spectacular. By the plane window, Li Tian looked down at the electrically large island that Fang Yin could faintly see, and his eyes showed shock. Being at a high altitude, the island of me below is far away, and it is precisely this way that one can see the whole picture of my island. This huge sea island is surrounded by an extremely spectacular defensive wall, and inside is a huge city. Island, my island. Wow Kaka, we're here so soon. It seems that my island is not far from the neon lights recently. All Might couldn't help laughing when he saw the island over there. Seeing him for 340 years my friend on my island, he is also looking forward to it. Passengers, this flight is about to arrive at my island, please bring your belongings and get ready. The plane landed smoothly at the airport on the outermost side of my island. After all, it was a plane from the future world. When it landed, Li Tian didn't feel any bumps at all. After getting off the plane and changing into their respective heroes' suits in the changing room, it is the immigration inspection of my island. The importance of my island to the world is self-evident. More than 10,000 scientists and their research results are all the most precious wealth in the world. Even All Might or even the leaders of various countries cannot be exempted from this inspection when entering the island. Standing on the translational elevator, a series of light that is not dazzling swept across the three people's bodies and their respective luggage, and the virtual projection quickly showed their identities beside them. And various information. Name Junzun Li Tian. Is it very detailed? Li Tian looked at the data on the virtual screen and couldn't help being surprised, some of which he didn't even know or forgot, scratched his chin, and Li Tian glanced casually. A glance at the side of All Might and Izuku Midoriya. Name Yagi Toshinori. Hero's name All Might. The name Green Valley Izuku. My island immigration and border inspection entry check is complete. This defense is really strong enough. After all the inspections were completed, Li Tian couldn't help but click his tongue. No wonder there hasn't been a villain's invasion since its establishment. The reason why in the original movie version there will be invasions by villains, and the full support of Dr. David and his assistants is absolutely indispensable. Otherwise, it would be impossible for such a situation to occur. All Might is like this now, the other party should have no reason to make such a mistake. Li Tian looked at the shriveled All Might in front of him and muttered inwardly. Let's go, Green Valley. All Might may have to wait a while before leaving, let's go first. Li Tian patted the shoulder of Green Valley, who had finally squeezed out from the crowd, and then walked straight forward. LVGU, who was almost vomited by the surging crowd, turned his head and looked at the wall of people that had tightly surrounded All Might, hesitated for a moment, and then decisively followed behind Li Tian. Mr. Li Tian, wait for me. My island. It's All Might after all. Even after retiring, the popularity is so terrifying. Li Tian couldn't help but think of the scene where the shriveled version of All Might was recognized by the surrounding passengers as soon as he appeared on the stage, and then surrounded by tearful young ladies. A chill. Seeing that Lu Gu was in a mess, and was vigorously wiping off the lipstick marks on his face accidentally injured by several women, Li Tian sneered 3 times. Fortunately, his super speed, power, and speed reaction were unmatched, and he avoided them all in an instant. That's All Might, the world's #1 hero. The popularity is of course terrifying. And because of Kano's retirement battle, All Might's current image has also been exposed. Although he retired due to injury, his popularity is not the slightest influence. As soon as All Might was mentioned, Green Valley's instinct was to brighten his eyes, and then he was about to speak incessantly. Hold, stop. Li Tian hurriedly signaled to stop Lu Jiyu, who was about to mumble. His ears couldn't bear the long-winded speeches. Let's go. There are often professional heroes here on my island. The excitement of these people shouldn't last long. All Might can be released in half an hour at most. Let's take a stroll around my island. Although I really don't want to, wouldn't it be more boring to go shopping with big men, but let Li Tian go shopping alone. Unfortunately, Yi Yin is going to come with Yaoyorozu Wan and the others. I don't know when the flight will arrive. Li Tian muttered. Can be with girls. How could Li Tian choose to come with All Might and Green Valley? He is not a fan of Ochu or Little Angel. The key is, all the girls in the class were invited by Yaoyorozu Wan in the past. We came to my island together, and Tian naturally couldn't leave the group. As for Li Tian's past, he thought about it, but it's hard to say. Li Tian sighed. My island is different from Neon and many countries. In fact, on this island, quirks can be used freely, and even many landscapes on the island are made with quirks. For example, the fountain over there. A series of water jets from a series of giant fountains stagnated in midair, congealed into a sentence of, "Welcome to my island," then fell again, and then the fountain rose again, and so on. This is definitely something that can only be achieved after integrating into quirks. There are also cable cars floating in the air one by one in the distance, either quirks or cutting-edge scientific achievements. These are things that can only be seen or even experienced in my island. And my island is not only tourists from all over the world, but also professional heroes from various countries all over the world. Even during this short period of time, Li Tian has seen several professional heroes in Chinese-style clothing. The conversations he occasionally hears on the mains are also very familiar and friendly language to him. It's a pity, it's just specious. After all, it's not his real motherland. A touch of sadness suddenly appeared in Li Tian's heart. He is now rootless duckweed after all. Well, Mr. Li Tian, I'm very curious. Why did you and All Might come to my island suddenly? During the summer vacation, the school specially asked us not to run around to avoid the attack of the villains. Green Valley suddenly asked curiously. Didn't All Might tell you? It was All Might's friend who invited him to my island to borrow the advanced equipment here for physical examination and treatment. By the way, I will give you and me a quirks test. Li Tian calmed down. He said with a light smile, there is nothing to hide. Mr. Li Tian and I. Quirks test. Lu Jiyu was taken aback. It is not surprising that All Might was invited to my island to check on the physical treatment, but how could he be involved in the quirks test? It's. Li Tian opened his mouth and explained the relationship between Melissa and All Might, and about the rare breed of quirks that they awakened at the age of 15. Oh, Green Valley exclaimed. I want to check my quirks, but my quirks. Just as Green Valley was about to say something, he immediately covered his mouth and looked carefully at the tourists around him. Obviously, no one noticed the conversation between the two high school students here. Mr. Li Tian, you also know that my quirks are one for all, if they are found out. Green Valley said nervously. Don't worry, quirks detection is not so mysterious. Li Tian shook his head. Quirks have only been around for decades, and even if a large number of scientific researchers have invested in it, it is only a sham. It is impossible to accurately detect that your quirks are exactly the same as All Might's quirks, and no one will think about it. Here, I noticed a previous mistake. In the workplace experience, when Melissa first appeared on the stage, Li Tian pretended not to know that One for All called out Green Valley. At that time, he didn't notice that All Might had already had a showdown with Li Tian, so it was written as All Might also think Li Tian doesn't know about One for All, sorry. Greater than people less than winking face. That's it. Then I'm relieved. LVGU heaved a sigh of relief, the expression on his face also calmed down, and he began to look at the surrounding things with ease. After all, he is just a 15-year-old child, and it is his first time visiting my island, so it is impossible not to be curious. By the way, Li Tian suddenly remembered, and then used his cell phone to send a text message to Melissa, informing them that they had arrived on my island. I didn't receive a reply, it should be because I didn't see the news in the laboratory. Li Tian thought secretly, forget it, let's play for a while. Li Tian put down his phone, touched this side and that side curiously all the way, and started playing happily. Although the sum of the past life and the present life is over 30 or 40 years old, but, now Li Tian calls out that he is only 15 years old, there is that guy who can come out to refute him. The customs clearance time is 11 seconds. It took only 11 seconds to complete the challenge and rank first. It's really amazing. The voice of the host sounded. My island, a simulation villains battle playground. Green Valley walked down from the rockery of the simulated robot villains with a face of embarrassment, a little overwhelmed by the cheers around him, especially when there were many words he could not understand. 11 seconds, much faster than the original 16 seconds, is it 10% One for All? Li Tian leaned on the railing and looked at the Green Valley below thoughtfully. Green Valley, how much power can you freely use now? Green Valley walked back, Li Tian asked curiously. Green Valley was taken aback for a moment, then scratched his head and said indifferently, 8%, I have maintained 8%, and I haven't tried to increase my strength for a while. Li Tian looked at Lu Jiyu and couldn't help being speechless. If ordinary people have the power of One for All, they will definitely not be able to help testing their limits, and as soon as they make progress, they will think about how to exert stronger power, just like him, trying to break through their speed limit every day, to make himself faster and stronger, but it turned out that Green Valley didn't care at all. Moreover, even the final exam and the million battle, no, it was half an hour of being abused, and I didn't even think about increasing my strength. How is this? Speechless. You can't do this. Li Tian said helplessly, you can't keep letting All Might or me remind you, occasionally you have to try yourself to master the power of One for All faster. I remember. Lu Gu's face was slightly red, and he was ashamed. Indeed, knowing that he has great power but not digging hard, it is no wonder he is not ashamed. Well, why don't Mr. Li Tian go up and play for a while? Green Valley subconsciously said, but he reacted immediately after speaking. He thought of Li Tian's quirks, and Li Tian's character. For nothing. Forget it. Li Tian waved his hand directly, looking at the game field below where people are going up again, with a lack of interest on his face. This kind of game of competing for speed is completely meaningless to me, going up is just bullying, it's just people. Let's go. Melissa is done with her work, I'll be here soon, and All Might has almost gotten rid of those fans. Li Tian looked at the reply letter he just received from Melissa on his phone, and called out to Green Valley. He couldn't wait to check his speed force. He was very curious, whether his power was really DC's speed force, or the quirks of his body itself. And, Li Tian has been coveting the omnipotent guardian Nuomas that Melissa gave to Green Valley in the movie version for a long time. When Li Tian and Green Valley returned not far from the entrance of the island, they saw All Might and Melissa who had already met from a distance. Although All Might looks a little, resulting in battles. Mr. Li Tian, here. From a distance, Melissa waved her hand to leave. Melissa. Li Tian also smiled and waved, and walked over quickly, long time no see. Melissa looked to the side of Green Valley, smiled and stretched out her hand. Hi, I'm Melissa Heald, nice to meet you. Green Valley panicked, seeing Melissa stretching out her hand, hurriedly took off her gloves and stretched out her hand. Hello. I'm Green Valley Izuku. I know you, you are Mad Uncle's disciple, but I have heard Mad Uncle tell you a lot about you. Melissa had an incomparably bright smile on her face. This is another rare 15-year-old awakening boy of the quirks. Melissa, it's time to go. All Might interrupted the conversation of several people. Just now, before he met with Melissa, he had spoken with David, and the inspection equipment had already been prepared. By the way, Dad has to wait in a hurry. Melissa also reacted, smiled embarrassedly, quickly led the way, and raised her hand to beckon a suspended sightseeing car like a ball to take everyone sit up and leave the dust. Hurry up, turn on the equipment over there and get ready, and check it again, making sure there are no mistakes. My Island, Advanced Lab. A group of men and women in white coats are running around in the laboratory, and Dr. David Hilder, the person in charge of this institute, is constantly checking the data of the numerous instruments at the main console so as not to appear nothing wrong. You know, the person who came to check this time is his good friend, Hero S. All Might. After typing the last keyboard, Dr. David couldn't help but let out a long breath, with a smile on his face. It's done. Dad, Melissa's voice suddenly sounded from the gate of the institute. I brought Mad Uncle here. David, following behind Melissa, All Might looked at David with a look of excitement on his face. John, All Might. Dr. David shrank his eyes when he saw the shriveled All Might standing beside Melissa. Even if he had heard the news from his daughter, he had seen the photos a long time ago, but seeing it with his own eyes, he still couldn't believe it. All Might, who used to be extremely reassuring, has turned into this skinny appearance. The other researchers on the side also covered their mouths, looking at the skinny All Might with regret in their eyes. This is the Hero S who used to be number one. Now it has become like this. Haha, it's been a long time. David, All Might obviously didn't care about David's shock, but stepped forward to give him a big bear hug. Okay, long time no see. David finally calmed down, looking at All Might with joy and undisguised sadness in his eyes. Although I have heard. But your appearance is really unacceptable. Haha, it's alright. All Might laughed. He was very open, or he had accepted his crippled body as early as 5 or 6 years ago. What's more, he has already retired, and All for One was also arrested and imprisoned. Now, except for his disciples, he has no regrets. The two chatted for a while, and David decisively sent out all the other researchers. Melissa, Green Valley and Li Tian were also sent away. The next inspection was about number 1, and he was the only one. People can be present. Although both All Might and Li Tian Lugu understood that this was a waste of effort, they still followed Melissa and went to Melissa's personal research room at school. My God, how is this possible? Melissa's exclamation sounded in this small, even somewhat crude laboratory. Melissa, what's the matter? Lu Jiyu on the side tightened his face and asked hastily. At this time, the person who was undergoing testing was Li Tian, lying in a coffin-like inspection cabin. Li Tian also pricked up his ears and stopped. It should be because my ability is quite a lot and quirks has been discovered. Li Tian muttered secretly in his heart. It was because of this that he rejected Melissa's father, Dr. David, the reason why he and Green Valley refused when they learned that Melissa was going to examine the two of them and allow them to use the laboratory equipment. Whether it's his Speed Force or Green Valley's one for all inspection results, it's better not to leak it out. How could the value of the quirks factor be so high? Melissa sat in front of the computer monitor with an expression of disbelief, and her hands moved on the keyboard like flying, verifying the results of the monitor over and over again. The value of the quirks factor is high. Li Tian's eyes blinked, his face full of bewilderment. What do you mean? His quirks factor is high. Quirks factor. It sounds like something related to quirks. It is very high, which means it is very strong, but he has a hairy quirks. His powers are amazing. No way. Could it be that my Speed Force is not the Goldfinger after crossing, but the original quirks? Li Tian was startled suddenly. Such a thought suddenly appeared in his mind, and then he couldn't control it. His own memories recalled the memories in his mind, and some discordant places that he had ignored in the past appeared in his mind little by little. Quirkless, extremely born without quirks, or extremely weak and unable to awaken quirks. Generally speaking, 99.9% of quirkless's parents will have at least one of their parents as extremely weak quirks, or even both parents are extremely weak quirks. However, he, Li Tian, the son of Hero S, both parents are powerful quirks who can become professional Hero S. Not to mention how powerful quirks are. It is customary to have quirks, but the predecessor, whether he became the rare quirkless in this generation, I didn't think about it before, but I think about it now. The chances are indeed too small. The predecessor has indeed been quirkless for 15 years. It is impossible for him to travel through and bring a powerful quirks, or the previous quirks are too weak to awaken. Until he travels back, the double soul brings 10 times and 100 times the happiness. That's not right. I've never heard of anyone's quirks factor being related to the soul magic horse. Even if there is a relationship, isn't the power of the soul usually related to faster learning and better manipulation? Quirks has directly changed from being weak and unable to awaken to being so powerful. How could he have anything to do with the soul? By the way, speaking of the quirks of the parents in this life are acceleration and brain activation or brain acceleration. Zetian couldn't help murmuring. The acceleration of the body and the acceleration of the brain, combined, isn't this his super speed force? No way. Could it be that speed force is the former quirks, but for some reason it didn't awaken and was wronged as quirkless for more than 10 years, and I didn't awaken until I crossed over. Li Tian looked at the sky speechlessly, wondering if he should be so bloody. However, when he awakened quirks, how did he explain the thunderbolt that gave him the speed force? It couldn't be because he owed it to the lightning strike. And he really got the speed force in his mind at that time. Information is correct. Li Tian denied countless thoughts one after another, and his head couldn't help but hurt. On one side Li Tian was thinking wildly, on the other side Melissa in front of the computer was also about to cry. Generally speaking, the value of the quirks factor in the human body cannot exceed 20,000. Even the result of his father's inspection of All Might at its peak was only 17,800, fluctuating between around 1,000, at most close to 20,000, or in the early 20,000s. What the hell is this in front of you? 46,330, 46,332, 46,333, have not fallen and have been rising, and the value is so high. How is this possible? How can the quirks factor in the human body be so strong? Human genes can't bear it. Melissa looked at although the results on the computer monitor were weak, but the numbers were more than one time. I couldn't believe it, but I had to believe the results of checking dozens of times. Green Valley and Li Tian on the side may not understand what the numbers above mean, but she is the daughter of David Hild. Her father, as the winner of the Nobel Prize in Quirks, naturally has a deep understanding of quirks. Quirks are also a part of the body. Powerful quirks require a strong body to carry them. But the so-called strong body does not simply refer to physical fitness, but refers to human genes. Quirks are engraved on genes' password. Powerful quirks need strong genes to carry them. And there are a large number of inspection reports of professional heroes and ordinary people in my island, from less than 100 in quirkless to over 20,000 in All Might, the highest peak. This distance represents the peak value of human quirks. That's right. Not even afraid to say it, Melissa had secretly read his father's experimental reports, and it's not like she hasn't seen ones with values exceeding 20,000 and reaching 24,500, but, at the end of those reports, what she saw there are two big scarlet characters, oh. It was also after that fright that Melissa didn't dare to peek at his father's test report anymore. She understood, there is not the field she should be in contact with. But that time she deeply remembered a conclusion in the report. Humans have limits. But quirks factor of 460,000. How did Li Tian survive? Melissa couldn't help but turned her head to look at Li Tian, who got up. Her eyes couldn't help but become weird, as if she was look like a monster. Noticing Melissa's gaze, Li Tian scratched his face helplessly. Although he didn't know the specific test results, whether it was the exclamation before or Melissa's gaze now, Li Tian deeply understood. Melissa, is there anything wrong with my test results? Li Tian asked. He also wanted to know what the numbers and words above meant. On the side, Green Valley also looked over curiously, and he was also curious about why the results of the inspection shocked Melissa to such an extent. Sensing the gazes of the two, Melissa's complexion became complicated. What's the problem? It's a big problem, let's go. Call _*. Taking a deep breath, Melissa forced herself to calm down, but the gaze that looked at Li Tian as if looking at a monster did not change much. Let me tell you this. Looking at the data in front of me, I am shocked. Li Tian, how did you survive? The corner of Li Tian's mouth twitched. How could he speak? How did he survive? How did you survive? Lu Jiyu couldn't help exclaiming, and asked weakly, Miss Melissa, is Mr. Li Tian's situation very bad? It's hard to say. Just by checking the data, Li Tian shouldn't be able to stand here, but the key point is that he is indeed standing here. Melissa couldn't help but shook her head. It is already far beyond the scope of her knowledge and ability. Even Li Tian couldn't help showing a look of astonishment when he heard Melissa's words. What do you mean you shouldn't be able to stand here? Could it be that you should still be lying here? Although I have known for a long time that the Traverser may be different, but it seems to be too different. Sure enough, no matter how ordinary I pretend to be, I can't hide my alluring face and unparalleled talent. My God, can't you two have a normal person? In the laboratory, Melissa looked helplessly at the test results on the monitor, feeling deeply speechless in her heart. Although, she had already guessed that those who awakened to quirks at the age of 15 would definitely not be ordinary people, but she never expected that such things would happen one after another. The previous Li Tian's quirks factor test result was as high as 46,000, which is more than twice the limit of normal human beings, and there is no fluctuation at all. It's just that the quirks factor is higher every time. Just standing on the side and panting, it can make Melissa feel that he is standing beside Miracle. As for the other Green Valley Izuku, Melissa looked at the data on the monitor. That's a rare, extraordinary column chart that has never been seen before. From a quirks factor of 3,000 to a quirks factor of 25,000, there is a difference of 22,000. Do you think this is a roller coaster? Melissa resisted the desire to complain. And it's rare, but there's no question, this is clearly another example of quirks pushing the limits of humanity. The human limit, isn't it very difficult to break through? Melissa couldn't help but began to doubt life. Human limits. I am a boss who has trapped billions of people in the world by himself. Please, can you show me some face? Melissa's reaction obviously attracted Li Tian's attention. He simply didn't think about whether his ability was quirks or the golden finger of traveling through the world. This kind of question that can't be answered, or the answer depends entirely on the person, of course. Indecision. Quantum mechanics. Li Tian looked up at the test results on the monitor in front of him. After his test results came out just now, Melissa has already popularized some of the most basic knowledge to them. At least Li Tian can already understand the meaning of the Arabic numerals in the bar graph from the data on the monitor. 3,000-25000. It's interesting. Li Tian propped his chin and began to think. If you don't consider other things, it's purely from data analysis. The upper limit of Green Valley's quirks one for all is 25,000, while the lower limit is 3,000, and the lower limit is 12% of the upper limit, and Green Valley's ability to control the full coverage of one for all is indeed almost 10%. Around, a little bit stronger can reach 12%. Seems pretty accurate. Li Tian chuckled lightly. How about it, the result of the inspection? Seeing no movement for a long time, Lu Jiyu, who was lying in the inspection cabin, couldn't help asking. Don't ask, it's bungee jumping. Li Tian replied casually. Bungee jumping. Green Valley is at a loss, what and what? However, the inspection seemed to be over, so Green Valley walked out of the inspection cabin, and looked curiously at the display screen with his inspection results. It's bungee jumping. Looking at a bar chart that almost linked the bottom and top of the display, LVGU looked astonished. What's the situation? He had listened to Melissa's explanation before. Generally speaking, the fluctuation interval of the quirks factor is about 1,000 to 3,000. Li Tian's kind of fluctuation is already rare and cannot be rare. As a result, it seems to be quite rare. Scratching his head, Lu Jiyu forcibly extinguished the little flame of pride in his heart. You can't be proud. Miss Melissa, what's the matter with my quirks test result? Green Valley couldn't help asking. Call me Melissa. Melissa, who was awakened from doubting her life by Green Valley's question, said weakly, as for the test results. To be honest, I don't understand it. I don't understand. Green Valley blinked. Yeah. Melissa didn't mean to hide anything, and said directly, my major is not the study of quirks, but the design, modification and principle of auxiliary equipment. To be honest, the quirks detection chamber here is still my previous one. It was specially borrowed for a few days, and the test of quirks was also the first actual test. That's it. Just as Lugu was about to speak to express his understanding, he heard Melissa continue. Also, what about the situation of you two? Even if a professional professor of quirk studies came, I'm afraid they couldn't explain your situation well. I think maybe only my father can give you the most complete explanation. Melissa was helpless, said the stall hand. Hearing Melissa's words, Li Tian and Green Valley suddenly felt a little relieved. Isn't this the so-called not that our army is not working hard, but that the enemy army is too cunning? How about it? Do you want me to visit my father now? He will definitely be very interested in the situation of the two of you. Melissa asked. Forget it. Li Tian shook his head decisively and refused. He asked Melissa for a test just to avoid attracting attention. How could he ram himself into the muzzle of the gun now? And Green Valley on the side hesitated for a moment, but also shook his head and refused. Although the result of the quirks test is very weird, he is not very eager to find out. After all, he still has All Might, the former 1-for-AII holder, by his side. If there is a problem, he still believes in All Might. That's good. I will keep the quirks test results of you two secret, even if it is Dad, I will not say it. Seeing that both of them refused, Melissa had no other thoughts, and casually took the test results of the quirks test chamber. The data was deleted, and the expression on his face relaxed. Finally, I don't have to think about the strange situation of you two. No matter how I look at it, this is not the area I should consider now. Then when it's time for you to think about this field, Melissa, come and find me. Seeing Melissa's movements, Li Tian felt relieved and said jokingly, unlike common sense, for scientists, it often means that they can be researched, and this is what Li Tian taboos. HMPH, let's talk about it when the time comes. Melissa snorted softly. She is not stupid, so she can naturally see what Li Tian means. Within a few minutes, the shy and upright Mr. LVGU. As for now, let's go, I will show you my island. The other side. How is this going? In the advanced laboratory of my island, Dr. David looked at the data on the display screen in panic, turned his head suddenly, and looked at All Might, who had already sat up. Jundian, what's wrong with your quirks? Is it the same as disappearing? All Might stood up and blinked, a little dazed, then reacted, and looked at David in front of him with a wry smile. David, didn't you agree to only check for injuries and not for quirks? This is the latest achievement of my island. The body has been checked with quirks. Well, don't change the subject. Dr. David frowned and said in a deep voice, no matter how serious the injury is, quirks will never be physically injured. What happened to Jundian? This. All Might hesitated for a moment, and then said in a serious voice with a serious expression on his face, David, tell me about my physical condition first, whether there is any possibility of healing. This. Doctor. David also hesitated for a long time before shaking his head and said, if Jundian's injury appeared only recently, then the latest research results of my island still have some. It may be cured, but this is an old injury from 6 years ago. With the maintenance of activities, your current body. My island can't be cured. Dr. David said through gritted teeth. Yeah, it can't be cured. All Might smiled. My body has already become like this, so what's the use of keeping quirks? You mean, after all, Dr. David is also the winner of the Nobel Prize in Quirks, and his understanding of quirks is almost at the top of this world. It is just the hint of All Might and the results of the examination. He seems to think what? There was a look of horror in the eyes of All Might. Is it possible? I bet it on the future. A genial smile appeared on All Might's face. Dr. David was silent, looking at All Might's familiar and unfamiliar smile. His expression flickered, as if he had vaguely seen the scene of All Might saying that he wanted to become a symbol of peace decades ago beside him. 0. Oh, I really lost to you. Dr. David shook his head, with a wry smile on his face. Obviously, he didn't expect All Might to keep a hand. Sorry David, I didn't mean to hide it, I just don't want you to get involved in the battle between me and All for one. I can't drag you and Melissa into that kind of dangerous battle, come on. Ulmer's face revealed a look of apology. In addition, it is probably an instinctive concealment. No one will find out and ask. He will not take the initiative to tell anyone about One for All. This is already an instinct that has been carved into All Might's bones. Green Valley Izuku. I believe in All Might. Li Tian. I believe it. Takauchi Masao. I believe it. Yan. I believe it too. Young girl. Of course I do. Mr. Principal. I believe you, Ghost. No, I'm not blaming you. Dr. David shook his head, with a smile on his face, "You must never relax in the slightest when fighting that kind of villains, and, your quirks it is definitely not suitable for too many people to know." If it was before, David would never have said such a thing, but after becoming Dr. David and having experienced in my island for a long time, he also understood how cruel, how dangerous this world really is. If we talk about concealment, I'm actually the one who didn't tell Jundian you more things. Dr. David shook his head with a smile. All Might couldn't help but heaved a sigh of relief when he heard David's joking tone, and then said with a smile, "Haha, after all, David, you are the top scientist in the world, and you need to keep everything strictly confidential." "Haha, indeed, I don't even know how many non-disclosure agreements I have signed." Dr. David scratched his head and laughed. In the laboratory, the two big men looked at each other and smiled. The estrangement they hadn't seen for a long time and the concealment seemed to disappear in this instant. "However, after all, it is only as if." "No, you can't. Only that matter, you must never tell Jundian. This world." Dr. David smiled, but his heart was cold. What the two laughing people didn't notice was the figure that flashed by outside the laboratory door they didn't close tightly. "Look at this, the multifunctional hound suit, which can fly into the sky and move freely underwater, and its tracking ability is better than a real hound no matter in the sky or in the sea." Melissa pointed a booth introduced to Li Tian in Green Valley. On the top of the booth, there is also a display video of this multifunctional hound combat suit flying freely in the sky and the sea, which looks quite interesting. "Look at this, put on this battle uniform, even if you dive into the depths of 7,000 meters, there will be no problem at all." Melissa pointed proudly at the mermaid-like battle uniform in a huge water tank. "Open your mouth and say." Li Tian raised his eyes and looked over. Obviously, that huge water tank is not an ordinary thing, it should be a high-tech pressurized tank that can imitate the pressure of deep-sea water. Opening parenthesis, closing parenthesis. "Almost all the props here are made using my father's research results," Melissa said proudly. "It's amazing, as expected of Dr. David," Green Valley exclaimed in cooperation. "By the way, I don't think I've seen this kind of high-tech battle uniform before." Li Tian scratched his chin and said strangely, "Of course not. All the things on display here are not for sale. Not to mention the high cost, and most of them are difficult to mass produce, and subsequent maintenance and repairs are also difficult to carry out." Melissa laughed and explained, "However, sooner or later, every piece of equipment here can help professional heroes start their work smoothly." "So that's how it is." Li Tian was stunned. "Isn't this the so-called concept exhibition? Exhibit a bunch of products that are still in concept or difficult to popularize, so as to enhance the brand." Melissa suddenly stood next to booth 430 and waved to the two with an excited face. Melissa pointed to the black tight-fitting battle suit in the booth and introduced, "This battle suit is called Negative Mountain. It is not a regular hero's battle suit, but a training suit. After wearing it, any action will be very strenuous, and it is made of high elasticity and high toughness materials, so it can be worn on any body shape without affecting movement, and it is very breathable and will not be stuffy." Whether it was Green Valley or Li Tian, they could clearly see the confidence and pride in Melissa's eyes when she introduced the combat uniform. Seeing Melissa like this, Li Tian's expression changed, and he said thoughtfully, "Melissa, this battle suit against the mountain is not your invention." "Hey, you guessed it right." Melissa showed a bright smile on her face, without the slightest embarrassment, but a look of pride. "This is the research topic I spent a whole year last year. It's amazing. Melissa was able to invent such a powerful thing." Lugu looked surprised, looking at the girl in front of him who was at most 2 or 3 years older than him, and couldn't help feeling admiration in his heart. "Indeed, although this training suit does not increase the combat power much, if it is used for training, I am afraid that every professional hero would want to get one." Li Tian also nodded in praise. "I'm still far behind. Although this training suit has been invented, due to the material and craftsmanship, it can only be used as a sample in the exhibition hall for the time being. Therefore, I still need to study harder." Hearing the compliments from Li Tian and Lu Jiyu, Melissa blushed slightly. She was finally a bit shy, and then quickly waved her hands and said, "Then when will it be on sale? I will get a set, and I will get a discount for reporting the name of your inventor, Melissa." Li Tian showed a smile, jokingly said, "No problem. I'll give you a fracture when the time comes. Melissa snorted twice, saying due to the weather. Then forget it, can't afford it. Li Tian hastily shook his head and waved his hands. After the joke was over, Melissa continued to lead LVGU and Li Tian to visit this auxiliary equipment exhibition hall. To be honest, it is much better to have an acquaintance take it with you than to visit by yourself. In the remote corner, as long as there are interesting auxiliary equipment, Melissa can find it, and she can even tell 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Far more enjoyable than Li Tian and the others wandering around by themselves. And the pieces of sci-fi supporting equipment are eye-opening for Li Tian and Green Valley, and even a lot of them can play a great role in Li Tian or Green Valley, but unfortunately, these conceptual products, it is impossible for my island to be sold. And even if it was sold, Li Tian and the others couldn't afford it. If it was worn out, there would be no place to repair it. Leaving the Professional Hero's Auxiliary Equipment Exhibition Hall. Melissa, thank you very much today. Without your leadership, we would not have been able to see so many interesting things in such an interesting exhibition hall. Green Valley thanked. Thank you, how about buying me a drink? Melissa said with a light smile. Let's go. We've packed lunch too. Li Tian raised his eyebrows and said with a smile. Let's pack our lunch together too. Li Tian was taken aback by the sudden familiar voice. Turning around, Yi Yin, Yaoyorozu Wan, Jiro and Uraraka stood behind them at some point. And it was Yi Yin who spoke just now. Student Uraraka, and Yaoyorozu Wan, Erlang, and Yi Yin. Green Valley turned his head and couldn't help but exclaimed. Let's pack our lunch together. Uraraka on the side repeated. Is this considered a big rape scene? Li Tian looked at Jiro fiddling with his headphone plug and signaled that everyone heard it, and he couldn't laugh or cry. Who are they? Melissa looked at the four girls curiously. This is our classmate in Xiangyang. Li Tian explained with a chuckle, then turned his head, and explained to the girls, this is Melissa, a resident of my island, the one who invited Green Valley and I came to my island. Hello, my name is Melissa Hild. Melissa stretched out her hand generously and said with a smile. Hello, I'm Yaoyorozu Momo. Yaoyorozu Wan, who responded the fastest, stepped forward and stretched out his hand. I am Toru Hagakuri. My name is Jiro Kyoka. I am Uraraka Ochako. What happened before was just a joke between them and Li Tian Lugu, but with people they didn't know present, the joke couldn't continue. By the way, when did you arrive at my island? Why didn't you call to tell me? Li Tian asked strangely. Of course he knew the news that the girls in his class were coming to my island, and Yi Yin didn't use it with him because he wanted to be together, but the invitation letter was sent to Yi Yin. He and Green Valley came with all might, so naturally there is no need for extra invitations. We arrived in the morning, but Iji is accompanying Asui and Ishido on the outskirts of my island. Yi Yin stuck out his tongue in embarrassment. Li Tian understands by Yin's meaning. Obviously Asui and Ishido's luck is still bad. Without Yi Yin's participation, they still haven't won the quota to enter my island expo. Yaoyorozu's invitation letter has 2 quotas that can bring people into the My Island Expo, but if Li Tian's invitation letter is used by oneself, it can bring people, but after sending it, it can only be used by one person. I don't know if it's because all the women in the heavens and myriad worlds look the same, and they can talk and laugh like friends after they just met each other not long ago. 5 women sat at a table and talked and laughed, while Li Tian and Lu Jiyu gathered at the table and looked at each other, having nothing to say. I've been waiting for a long time, drinks and meals for you too. There were 2 familiar voices again. Kaminari, Mineta, why are you here? Green Valley shouted in surprise, and met his own classmates again. Is it such a coincidence? Here, Li Tian glanced at this restaurant, which was completely different from the movie version, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Is this the cosmic consciousness that belongs to force majeure? Absolutely. It's a rare summer vacation, but the teacher won't let us go far. And it happened that my island was recruiting again, so we came here. Kaminari and Putao explained. Indeed, during the summer vacation, Aizawa Shota specifically asked them to pay attention to safety during the summer vacation. It is best not to run far, so as not to be attacked by villains. At that time Li Tian was still a little strange. With his intervention, the League of Villains should not be successful. How could the school be so vigilant? However, my island, an island that has never had a villain's time, is naturally an absolutely safe endorsement for the school. Well, it suddenly feels like setting a flag. You can't really encounter the kind of thing in the theater version. Li Tian scratched his chin and laughed lightly. Of course Li Tian was joking. Now that Dr. David has no reason to help All Might, how could that group of villains sneak into my island without a sound? This is not a place where you can come in casually. Never have a criminal record on police records. And in the original book, if Dr. David hadn't helped invade the island's security system and took hostages on the entire island, otherwise it would have required a group of students, just thousands of professional heroes on the island, divided into 10. 1/10 of them can abuse those receiving goods 100 times. And my island is constantly drifting in the Pacific Ocean, without accurate coordinates, All for One can't get in. Li Tian, I said so. Somewhere in the corner of my island, a fat man who looks extremely simple and honest is carefully observing the surroundings, whispering on the phone, coordinate location, 8802E, 3626N. Repeat, coordinates position 8802E, 3626N. You mean Dr. David from my island? The doctor frowned involuntarily, even though he was so proud of his research level on quirks, but in the face of more than 10,000 scientists, my island, which is known as the most advanced on Earth, and the winner of the Nobel Prize for Quirks, the winner, Dr. David, couldn't be prouder either. The doctor hesitated for a moment, then said in a deep voice, if it's Dr. David from my island, it's not impossible to invent a non-drug enhancing device for quirks. That is to say, you can give it a try. Si Gang Mu Diao grinned and said, you can give it a try. This instrument may be of great inspiration to my research, and maybe even help you. The doctor nodded and said, okay then, prepare to call the troops. Sigang Muhang stopped his frantic squeezing of his body, took a deep breath and walked out of the room, but drank the nutrient solution handed over by the doctor in one gulp. Siganmu, it's best not to use our people this time, and don't make a big show of it. The doctor looked at Siganmu and said softly, attacking my island is undoubtedly provoking all those countries that participated in the research of my island. If we use our manpower, many countries will probably pay attention to us afterwards. Shigongmu's footsteps paused, and a thoughtful look appeared on his face. As I said before, with a lot of experience, Nigaragi has long learned what it means to control emotions and thinking. You mean, the silver fox that came into contact with us 2 days ago? Sigang Muhang said. That's right. The doctor looked at Sigangmu with a gratified smile on his face. As the one who adopted Sigangmu together with All for One, it can be said that he knows Shigongmu best besides All for One, wooden people. And the scene in front of him also made him see the growth of Shigongmu. That's right, it's Silver Fox. That international villains organization wants to use the Underground Guild's channel to enter Neon. Don't you think this is a good opportunity to test the sincerity of the other party? Smile. Will the other party agree? Sigang Muhang asked in a deep voice. Of course, not every villain's force has Kurogiri. The doctor was full of confidence, with a sinister smile on his lips. Besides, you are starting to take over the affairs of the organization, so some information is not enough. Clear, so I don't really understand the status of my island in the world. Although there has never been a villains incident on my island, it is said that there are hundreds of villains invasions every year, but they are concealed or blocked off the island. And these invasions, basically they are all from various countries or world-class large villains organizations. That is to say, there are very attractive things in my island, right? Nigaragi narrowed his eyes between the big fingers on his face. If there is a chance to invade my island, Silver Fox will definitely not let it go. That's right. The doctor nodded. Let the Silver Fox attract attention. We just need to get that thing. It's best not to cause any complications. Our final plan still needs time to prepare. During this time, it's best not to provoke too much trouble. Many forces. I know. Sikwonmu nodded expressionlessly. No matter how much he wants to destroy this society, he is still clear about his priorities and his own concerns. At the very least, he will not risk his life to provoke the truly powerful forces in the world until he has acquired the power that can rival his teacher All for One. In a word, we are only responsible for bringing your people into my island, and then we will do our business, and you will carry out your activities, and you will be responsible for your gains. The two are irrelevant, and you will be responsible for your own life and death. Shigeoki said impatiently. Said that he has been listening to people talking for half an hour, and he is already impatient. The person in charge of Silver Fox, the villain's organization opposite, couldn't help frowning and pondered. Of course he can understand the meaning of the dead handle wood. The other party obviously needs them to attract my island's attention so that they can carry out some plans. But, so what if I know, that's my island? Any advanced invention can definitely be sold at a high price, and may even greatly enhance the strength of the organization, and it has never been heard that villains can invade my island. This time, they are famous all over the world. Opportunity, this gun, they are willing to take it. The other party narrowed his eyes, thinking of Quirks, one of his subordinates who had just taken over as a cadre in Nihon. It's done. The person in charge on the opposite side nodded heavily. Mr. Shigaraki, tell me the location, and I'll send someone there right away. Very good. Then it's settled. Shigeoki got up and turned to leave. As for the location, does he still need to decide? Of course it's down to discuss. Is this group of people really reliable? In a high-level laboratory on my island, a fat man maintains a kind-faced worker, but his heart is anxious. Just now, he had a sudden decision to sell my island, but after thinking about it now, he felt a little bit regretful in his heart. Of course, it was not because he regretted betraying my island, but because he regretted that even the other party, without knowing the power and strength, he easily sold things to the other party. The other party only wanted the coordinates of my island, and even refused me to help them intrude. Presumably it must be a powerful villain's organization. The fat man comforted himself in his heart, but his heart ached. Stand up. That is the painstaking effort of the doctor. It will definitely sell for a big price. The fat man felt a little annoyed. His eyes rolled suddenly, and he thought to himself, why don't you take advantage of those villains disturbing my island, and find an opportunity to steal the things secretly? And then sell it on the black market. Sam. Suddenly a series of voices sounded. At the door, a figure came in to see the fat man in the laboratory, and frowned immediately. Sam, what are you doing? Doctor. The fat man. Sam reacted immediately. His face changed slightly, but then he showed an embarrassed smile. I'm sorry, Dr. David, I felt a little uncomfortable just now, so I just came here to rest for a while. Uncomfortable. Dr. David frowned. Since you are not feeling well, you should take a vacation this afternoon, Sam, and go to the hospital for a checkup. No, doctor, I'm just a little uncomfortable, I'll be fine after a little rest. Sam quickly waved his hand to refuse, patted his belly and laughed. Is it really not necessary? Dr. David asked, looking at Sam with a slightly ugly face. Really no need. Sam scratched his head. Doctor, what do you want me to do? Just tell me. That's it. David hesitated for a moment, but seeing Sam's insistence, he nodded. Wait a minute, tell the 3 groups to send all the materials needed for the next experiment to the laboratory. Come. I'll go to the doctor right away. Sam said quickly, ready to go out. And, Dr. David said suddenly, scanning Sam up and down, frowning. Sam, you should lose weight. Let me tell you, it's already very bad for your body if we don't exercise every day in the laboratory on my island. If you are so fat, your body will easily go wrong. Dr. David, he frowned admonishingly. He just did something wrong, and being scanned by Dr. David like this, Sam's back could not help but sweat. He should be thankful that he is not the kind of person who sweats on his face, otherwise, sweat would be easily exposed. I'm also trying to lose weight, but my body will keep gaining weight even if I drink cold water. There's nothing I can do about it. Sam patted his stomach pretending to be innocent and said. Then find a time to go to Area Circa. I heard that they made a byproduct during their research. I heard that it can burn fat without side effects. If you feel uncomfortable, you can rest here for a while. I asked Sokoff can go. All Might is still waiting for me, let's go first. Doctor. David patted Sam on the shoulder, said and turned to leave. 0. Yeah, Sam nodded, looking at the back of Dr. David leaving. His kind expression disappeared, and there was a hint of sternness in his eyes. Dining room. Everyone was talking and laughing while eating, and Li Tian also rarely controlled his food intake for some reason and didn't eat too much. After saying goodbye to Kaminari and Putao, who still need to work hard, the group continued to wander around my island. Li Tian glanced over there as if he had known each other for decades, and the eyes of the women strolling with their arms crossed were puzzled, and they muttered, "Women's friendship is really strange. Looking at them like this, it's no fun to go shopping. Green Valley, why don't you go to the simulated villains quirks battle playground to see if your record has been broken?" Li Tian said casually. According to the big universe consciousness, he remembered, there should be a few classmates in the simulated playground at this time. Although Bakugo and Kirishima may not come because he is the champion of the sports festival, Toro and Iida should be around there. A simulated villains quirks battle playground. Green Valley records. What is that place? It may be that Li Tian's voice was a little louder, and the attention of the girls who had been talking was also attracted. Except for Melissa, the other girls became curious. It's over there, a playground on the other side of my island, similar to Heroes Robot Hell, using robots to simulate villains, and then competing to clear the level. Green Valley only took 11 seconds to clear the level. Li Tian said with a smile, pointing to a rockery not far away. 11 seconds, that's amazing. Melissa immediately exclaimed. He knew about that competition. Usually, it takes more than 20 seconds or even 30 to 40 seconds for ordinary professional hero-s challenges. It's nothing. The grades must have been broken. After all, there are so many powerful professional heroes on the island. Green Valley scratched his head and said embarrassedly. Okay, then let's go and have a look. Uraraka raised his hand excitedly and shouted. The other women obviously didn't intend to refute, and they all agreed with interest. 14 seconds. It's such a pity, it's only 3 seconds away from the first place of 11 seconds, the host said regretfully, although today's record of 11 seconds is shocking enough, but 11 seconds if the second record is broken, it will be a real shock. 11 seconds. Deku, will it be Green Valley? On the field, Hong casually put his left hand on the iceberg, and the iceberg that killed all the robots on the field turned into water vapor with a puff sound quietly dissipated. Mr. Hong, you did a great job. On the stage at the edge of the venue, Iida Jung shouted excitedly. Iida-kun, Hong-kun. Suddenly, Green Valley's voice sounded behind Iida. Ha, Mr. Lugu, Mr. Li Tian. And, Iida was stunned, watching Lugu leave behind him, and the 5 girls couldn't help showing surprise. Why are Iida-kun and Hong-kun here, and they are still together? Lugu asked curiously. My family and I received an invitation letter for the My Island Expo, but we didn't have time at home, so we came here. As for getting together, it was a coincidence that we met on my island. Iida explained with a sound. Green Valley and Iida chatted, but Li Tian was rarely distracted. Sure enough, the consciousness of the universe is at work, otherwise how could it be such a coincidence? 4, 5, 3. Li Tian looked at Hong and Iida, and his eyes could not help revealing a look of solemnity. If we say, they are in Nuoda. If the coincidence of the island's encounter is caused by the consciousness of the universe, wouldn't the content of the theatrical version be? How is it possible? Li Tian secretly laughed in his heart. Just because they met his classmates by chance, he suspected that the theatrical version of Villain's Invasion would also happen. Haha, this is simply too possible. 2. According to Murphy's Law, the more you worry about something, the more it will happen. It looks like you have to be careful tonight, Li Tian said solemnly. Then Green Valley, what's going on with you, Mr. Li Tian, classmate Uraraka, classmate Yaoyorozu Wan, classmate Yi Yin, classmate Jiro, and this one? Ah, that's right. Green Valley quickly pointed to Melissa and introduced, this is Melissa, the daughter of a scientist on the island. She invited me and Li Tian to come to my island to play. Hi, I'm Melissa, Melissa greeted with a smile. This is Ida, a classmate of Mr. Midoriya in Xiangyang. It's a pleasure to meet you. Ida's serious self-introduction made Melissa a little embarrassed. Student Uraraka, we are. Before Green Valley finished speaking, Uraraka on the side smiled and said. We met by chance when we were playing on the island. It's an invitation from Bye Bye. I see. Iida nodded knowingly. He has been a classmate for a semester, and Iida has also learned about Yaoyorozu Wan's family. Green Valley. Hong on the field also came over at this time, looked at Green Valley calmly and said, that Deku on the field is you, Green Valley. Ah, it's me. Lu Ji Yu was stunned for a moment, and then nodded generously in response. This is not something to be ashamed of, isn't it? Sure enough, it's you. Sure enough, he said so. Sure enough, I still need to hone, and I have to become stronger faster. Sooner or later, one day, I will surpass your Green Valley. And you? Hong turned his eyes and looked at Li Tian, who was wandering in the sky. I will find a way to defeat you sooner or later. Ah, Li Tian blinked, looking at the fighting spirit full of Hong, with an unaccustomed expression on his face. Not to mention Li Tian, Lugu Iida and the other girls on the side are all very awkward at this time, and they are not used to it. After a semester, except for 1 or 2 grades during the sports festival, other times they can be loud. They are all extremely cold. Maybe, the pot that developed the ability of the left half of the body. After the hot blood passed, Hong's right half of his body began to exert strength, and he easily suppressed the scalding heat. Hong's expression immediately calmed down, and his expression of coldness returned. Seeing the recovery of Hong, everyone undoubtedly breathed a sigh of relief. Next, Team A of the heroic special team that carried out the special operation of my island has grown a little bit, and has already called up all the members of Class A here in the inner city of my island expo. And this is something that worries Li Tian. The protagonist team has arrived. Isn't it the turn of the villains team to appear? A corner of my island that no one pays attention to. A group of purple-black smoke appeared out of thin air, and slowly rotated to form a pitch-black door. Afterwards, more than a dozen heavily armed figures walked out of Kurogiri one after another. Finally, the group of purple-black mist turned into a figure. League of Villains, Kurogiri. This is my island. Villains. Carl looked at the exit of the alley not far away. His face could not help showing a touch of excitement. There has never been a villains who can step into my island, since from today onwards, it will be our Silver Fox's Medal of Merit. It doesn't matter what is there or what is not. From here on, we will separate and go our separate ways. Kurogiri said in a deep voice to the 10 men in front of Kurogiri with ugly steel. Go ahead, Carl said with a casual smile, looking at Kurogiri and the man. Open the portal, let's go. The man in the steel mask also ordered to Kurogiri with a chuckle. Yes, Master Kori, Kurogiri responded, and the purple-black weapon portal opened. The villains called Kori stepped into Kurogiri, and the black mist dissipated out of thin air. My lord, is it really okay to let them go like this? The retreat after we completed the mission. Some of the remaining villains who were heavily armed could not help but send back. No problem, Carl grinned, and didn't care about the problems of his team members. It was even more strange not to ask about matters related to his wealth and life. After we finish the mission and get the things, our submarines and helicopters will be on standby around my island, and there will be ships to pick us up in the far sea. By then, you will all be our Silver Fox heroes. Carl joked with a grin. Haha, we are also heroes. It's the abominable heroes. I still want to be villains. A group of people laughed happily, not caring about the surrounding environment. If you look carefully, you can find that the surroundings of their group of more than a dozen people have long been surrounded by an imperceptible layer of ripples in the air. Not only the sound, but even the video. If no one accidentally breaks into this area, it will not be discovered from the outside. This is the quality of a professional villains. Hey, it's time for you to start working. Carl suddenly turned around and looked at Bahong, the only one in the group. It was a middle-aged man who was not armed at all and looked a little scruffy, unlike other villains. Of course, the sloppy middle-aged man didn't pay attention to Carl's words, took out a laptop from behind him, opened it, casually connected to the data of the surrounding my island, and with a single finger, the sloppy middle-aged man directly launched quirks. Data that cannot be seen by the naked eye invaded the computer from the finger of the sloppy middle-aged man, and then used the computer as a springboard to spread across the island. 3 hours, the sloppy middle-aged man estimated in his heart and said, in about 3 hours I can replace the entire defense system of my island. 3 hours, can't it go any faster? Carl frowned and said in a deep voice. I can't hurry up. This is my island. It's not easy to invade. If you hurry up, you will be discovered easily, unless, the sloppy middle-aged man shook his head and said softly. Unless what? Carl asked in a deep voice. Unless you can send me to the control room of the central station in charge of the security defense system. If it is there, I can control the security defense system of my island in 3 seconds. The sloppy middle-aged man chuckled lightly. The control room in the central tower. Carl's face froze. There is no doubt that there will definitely be the most heavily defended place on my island. How could he send people there quietly? Of course, if he hadn't been so anxious to let Kurogiri leave just now, it wouldn't be so. Yeah, 3 hours is 3 hours. It's 5:30 now, and 3 hours later it will be 8:30. It's just convenient to organize and arrange our retreat. Carl coughed lightly and said seriously. The sloppy middle-aged man chuckled suddenly, and then explained, also, you still need to send me to the control room at the first moment of action, or find someone to seal the control room, otherwise you only need me. There are people who know a little about computers on the island, and they can easily reinstall the system to crack my control. It's so troublesome. Carl frowned, looking at the sloppy middle-aged man with disgust in his eyes. It's my island after all. The defense system is naturally the world's top level. The slovenly middle-aged man shrugged his shoulders, not caring about Carl's disgust, and said casually. I see. Even if Carl is disgusted, but among them, except for this sloppy middle-aged man, few of them know computers, let alone invade the security defense system of my island, but this is the most critical part of the. Marvin, Ian, when the operation starts, you two take him to the Lao Su's room. Carl directed to the 2 people in the team. Yes, the 2 looked at each other, and agreed simply. Meanwhile, on the other side, Kurogiri and villains Cory left. Start action at 8:30. Cory murmured, listening to the voice in the earphones. Obviously, the suspicious Silver Fox never thought that they were being monitored by the 2 people who had left. On the side, Kurogiri stood respectfully. The handwriting of the monitor obviously came from him quickly. This is the newly awakened problem of Kurogiri after the Annunciator was pulled out from his body last time. As long as you pass through his portal, you have to be careful if there are 2 small things left on your body. That's right, it's said that there was an exhibition at that time, and with that group of people attracting Hero SS attention, our operation must go much smoother. Cory couldn't help showing a ferocious smile on his face. It's just a pity that now is not the time to attract governments from all over the world, and we can't wantonly destroy it. The exhibition halls will be closed at 6 p.m. today. Thank you for coming today. The sound of closing echoed over the sky above my island. It's finally over. Today is the pre-opening and I'm so busy. Tomorrow will be the real opening. How busy it will be. At the door of the restaurant, Kaminari and Putao collapsed in front of the door with dejected faces. Obviously, the popularity of this restaurant and the intensity of their work far exceeded their imagination. Of course, the more reason was that they were doing this kind of work for the first time, and their bodies were not used to it. It only takes 1 or 2 months in a row, and you should be able to get used to it. After 1 or 2 years, this kind of intensive work is nothing at all. Fool, who wants to do this kind of work for a year or 2? We are Hero S Reserve. Kaminari and Putao turned around with grim faces. Hi, Li Tian smiled and waved. Obviously, the narration just now was exactly Li Tian's configuration. Why are you here? In an instant, the ferocious faces of Kaminari and Putao disappeared, and they spoke politely. Of course, it's not because he's afraid of Li Tian, but because a beautiful woman is in front of her, so she naturally wants Yuga's demeanor. Here to deliver things. Li Tian couldn't help admiring the 2 people whose faces changed in an instant. The speed, if he hadn't started hanging, he really couldn't see clearly. Sense something. Kaminari and Putao were both taken aback. That's right, it's the invitation for the reception tonight. Li Tian took out 2 invitations and handed them to Kaminari and Putao. This is really for us. Kaminari and Putao couldn't believe it. Even though they were at the reception tonight, they knew about it. The professional Hero S on the entire island, as well as a large number of scientists and dignitaries from various countries, will all gather at the welcome reception tonight. Even the places for adapted students are extremely sought after, and the 2 of them can't grab it arrive. As a result, now, he actually participated in it as a guest. You should thank Melissa very much. This invitation is specially made for you by her. On the side, Iida said with a righteous face. It's nothing, Melissa said with a smile and waved her hands. Thank you so much. Great benefactor. There is no way to repay great kindness and virtue, only by showing your body. Forget it, Li Tian said angrily as he presented 2 hand knives. Seeing the 2 people playing tricks in front of them, everyone beside them couldn't help laughing, and Melissa also covered her mouth and laughed lightly. Next, because of the need to change into formal dresses for the following reception, and because everyone's residences are not in the same place, they separated soon. Li Tian, Green Valley, can you and I go to the same place? Walking back, Melissa suddenly said. Going to a place. Lu Jiyu was taken aback, a little strange. But Li Tian is clear, although he doesn't know why, but the plot seems to be back on track again. My island, College of Science and Technology. I dare not say that this is the best science school in the world, but it is definitely a world-class institution, and its academic atmosphere can even be called the best in the world. And Melissa is the student here. This is my laboratory. Melissa pushed open the door and invited the 2 into the laboratory. The laboratory is not big, although there are a few research equipment, but it is much simpler than the laboratory where the 2 inspected quirks today. But it's surprisingly warm. Li Tian smiled as he looked at the small laboratory. I always thought that a scientist's laboratory was just an empty room full of cold instruments. Actually, it's almost the same. Melissa walked into the back room, rummaged through her things, and said casually, most of the laboratories on this island of mine are similar to what you said, but most of the private research laboratories kind of like me. Green Valley looked at the rows of trophies and marveled, are these trophies won by you, Melissa? It's amazing. Melissa came out of the back room with 2 boxes, and said with a light smile, actually, my previous grades were not very good, and it was only after studying hard that I slowly caught up. Now, you can barely become a trainee researcher on my island. That's already amazing. Melissa, you became a researcher of my island at such a young age. Green Valley couldn't help but said. Although he can barely be regarded as a top student in the class, but in this school where the gods of learning are everywhere, he is completely a scumbag, let alone Melissa who is arrogant among the gods of learning. It is the top of the mountain that he can only stand at the foot of the mountain and look up to. As for Li Tian, he felt that if he transferred to another school, went to this science and technology college, and then started to study, he would be able to catch up with Melissa in about a year or 2. Haha, a gift for you. Melissa smiled and handed the box to the 2 of them. Gift. Li Tian and Lu Jiyu were both dumbfounded. Li Tian didn't expect that besides Green Valley, even he would have a gift. Open it and have a look, Melissa said with her hands behind her back. This. Green Valley looked at Melissa with some hesitation. After signaling again, Green Valley finally opened the box in front of him, which contained a red bracelet. Obviously, Melissa smiled and said, Green Valley, put it on and press the panel to try it out. Panel. Green Valley put on the bracelet obediently, and then pressed the panel on the bracelet. Whoosh. In an instant, the small bracelet suddenly swelled up rapidly, wrapping round and round around Green Valley's forearm and fist. This is. Green Valley looked at the gauntlet on his hand in surprise. Universal Gauntlet. Its name. Melissa said. I asked about you from Matt Uncle a long time ago, so your body can't bear all the quirks because the quirks are too strong. Matt Uncle also told me about it, so, after returning to my island, I designed and completed this gauntlet. This gauntlet, even with the strength of Matt Uncle, can withstand the reaction force of 3 punches. The power of All Might can withstand 3 punches. Lu Jiyu was shocked. Doesn't this mean that he can use One for All to swing 3 punches without any scruples? This is too precious, I can't take it. Green Valley hurriedly wanted to tear it down and return it to Melissa. This is specially made for you, Green Valley. Even if you give it back to me, I can't let him use the raw materials or give it to someone else. So only you, Green Valley, can make my piece of equipment a hero, a member of S. Melissa waved her hand and said, and, we are already friends, aren't we? But, Lu Jiyu still hesitated. Okay, what are you doing coyly? You just accept Melissa's kindness. I'll find an opportunity to return the gift to Melissa in the future. Li Tian patted Lu Gu on the shoulder. Said angrily. That's good. Green Valley thought for a while, nodded heavily, touched the gauntlet of his right hand with a firm expression on his face. I will definitely use it well. I will definitely not embarrass Melissa. Melissa smiled and nodded, then turned her head to look at Li Tian, pointed to the box in Li Tian's hand and said, Li Tian, don't you want to open it to see your present? Just open it, presents. Of course, you have to open them one by one to be sincere. Li Tian said, opening the box in his hand. Then, this is. Li Tian looked at a box full of gummy bears with a dazed expression. Fudge. Green Valley on the side also had a look of astonishment, looking at Li Tian and Melissa on the side for some unknown reason. Hey. Melissa looked at Li Tian's bewildered expression, and immediately showed a smile of successful prank. Melissa's children's shoes. Li Tian looked at Melissa, who was smiling happily, and frowned, then picked up a piece of soft candy, put it in his mouth, and said, I like the gift very much. As long as you like it. Melissa suppressed a smile and nodded, and then PFF'd. Melissa couldn't help laughing immediately. Okay, let's stop playing. This candy is made by me and a sister in the research institute. A normal adult candy is shrunk inside a candy. Hundreds of times the heat required. 100 times the heat. Li Tian and Lu Jiyu were startled. However, Green Valley was puzzled, but Li Tian was pleasantly surprised. Calorie, or if you say it fiercely, some people will be puzzled, but, if it is translated into calories, you can probably understand a lot. Just as computers consume electricity, vehicles and airplanes consume fuel, the daily activities of the human body also consume energy, and this energy is heat, which is obtained from food. Moreover, for the human body, not only daily activities need to consume calories, but also normal life activities of the human body also need energy, such as blood circulation, respiration, digestion and absorption, etc. all need to consume calories from the human body. As for Li Tian, the biggest reason why he has such a terrifying appetite is that his body needs to consume 100 times the calories of ordinary people to maintain its functioning. And if this jelly candy contains 100 times the calories required by a normal adult, then Li Tian is definitely just what he needs. Much stronger than that universal gauntlet. Melissa, I don't even know how to thank you. This fudge is really important to me. Li Tian held a box full of fudge in his hand, with a look of excitement on his face. At least it's his rations for more than 3 months. Actually, there is still a little problem with that jelly bean. Melissa suddenly showed an embarrassed look on her face, because this box of jelly beans was an experiment when my sister and I jointly developed it. Products, so it's no problem to give it to Li Tian, but if you still need Li Tian, I'm afraid. Buy it with money, Li Tian said with a smile. Haha, isn't this a natural thing? Also, the price of this fudge is a bit expensive. Although it has already been produced in energy, because other people hardly need such a calorie fudge, it can be said that it can only be made by special customization. A fudge, the price is 30,000 yen. Melissa said embarrassingly. No problem. Li Tian didn't care. Calories didn't just appear out of thin air. To be honest, 30,000 yen a jelly candy felt a little cheap to Li Tian. Now he was choosing normal prices for every meal. The meals that need to be eaten, will be between 80,000 and 150,000 yen. Even in Xiangyang, each meal exceeds 30,000 yen, reaching the level of 40,000 to 50,000 yen. Seeing that Li Tian didn't look like a fake, Melissa was also relieved, and smiled again. To be honest, if Melissa felt that Li Tian needed food for 100 people for every meal and was shocked, then after giving Li Tian a quirks check, she would not be surprised at all, with that level of quirks factor. Even if Li Tian's body collapsed immediately, she wouldn't be surprised. In contrast, Li Tian can maintain this kind of body operation with the energy consumption of 100 servings of ordinary people. It's just not too cost-effective. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.